Chapter 136. Every time she came, she would bring some of Yu Qianqiu's favorite food. Once, Yu Qianqiu suddenly said, "Furong, you have to improve your cultivation. Maybe I'll need your help in the future." Therefore, other than the appointment time with Yu Qianqiu, Furong spent the rest of her time on cultivation. With the help of the medicinal pills personally refined by Yu Qianqiu, she successfully broke through to the core formation stage. As a result, Ferdinand was overjoyed. It was naturally a good thing to have someone to supervise his daughter's cultivation. In the cultivation world, what was more practical than improving one's own strength? Therefore, he was happy to see his daughter run to Yu Qianqiu. Moreover, he also knew that his daughter would not be able to leave Yu Qianqiu in this life. He also accepted his fate. "When are you leaving?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the three of them and smiled. Ling Feng sighed. "Sigh. I've woken up from my dream. It's time to leave. I think it'll be in a few days." Yu Qianqiu patted Furong on his shoulder and signaled Furong to stop and rest. Furong obediently leaned behind him and looked at the four people sitting around with her bright eyes innocently. Ling Feng and the other two secretly sighed. Look at what kind of life she led. The dignified daughter of the Wanfan Garden's principal elder personally patted her back. Moreover, she was such a beautiful woman. The table was filled with snacks brought by Furong. After Yu Qianqiu personally filled the 4 wine glasses on the table, he asked, "What are your plans after leaving?" The three of them looked at each other and shook their heads with a bitter smile. Ling Feng said with a bleak expression, "The three of us were orphans. We were brought to Fuxian Island when we were young and never left. Now, we don't even know what the outside world is like. After leaving, we really don't know what to do." "You don't want to walk the path of cultivation anymore?" Yu Qianqiu held a wine glass and asked. Ling Feng shook her head. "There's no chance. There will never be a chance. 3 foundation establishment pills can't help a disciple who is expelled from the sect. Which sect in the cultivation world would take in the abandoned disciples of supporting Immortal Island?" Hearing this, Beizi picked up the wine cup in front of her and drained it in one gulp. She actually shed tears and cried, "Martial uncle, I really can't accept this. I really can't accept this." Xian Ping drank a cup of wine in a muffled voice. Yu Qianqiu filled up their cups again and said with a smile, "What if we still have a chance after we get out of here? Do you guys want some?" The three of them shuddered and looked at him. Ling Feng pondered for a moment and stood up in surprise. "Does Martial Uncle have a clear path? If you can guide us, the three of us are willing to follow Martial Uncle's orders from now on." Yu Qianqiu smiled without saying a word. He glanced at the other two and raised his cup to drink. Beizi and Xian Ping immediately stood up and said, "Martial Uncle, please show us the way. We are willing to listen to your orders. It's good to talk to smart people." Yu Qianqiu gave them a thumbs up. Then he took out a small white porcelain bottle that was sealed and used to store pills and placed it on the table. He said with a smile, "If the three of you still want to succeed in building your foundation, after you leave supporting Immortal Island, bring this bottle to the capital of Wuxia Empire as soon as possible. Go to the Pillar of State General's office and find a person called Shi Xiaotian. He is the 3rd young master of the general's office. After you find him, tell him that I told you to find him. He will naturally arrange a place for you to stay and wait patiently. When the time comes, someone will come to help you build your foundation. Remember this well and don't forget it." The three of them were pleasantly surprised. They looked at each other and didn't know if this was true or not. Ling Feng took a deep breath and held the porcelain bottle in his hand. This was their only chance. Whether it was true or not, they had to give it a try. He repeated Yu Qianqiu's words again. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he nodded and said, "Martial Uncle, we will remember your words." "It's good that you remember it. You will have to grasp the opportunity yourselves." Yu Qianqiu then nodded and gestured for the three of them to sit down. He said, "I heard that there are more than 10 disciples expelled from supporting Immortal Island. If possible, it is best to bring them with you. Consider this a test. Don't let the others know." The three of them exchanged glances and nodded. "Martial Uncle, we understand." A few days later, in front of Penglai Pavilion's main hall, more than 10 dejected disciples boarded their flying magic tools under the supervision of 2 disciples from the Secular Objects Hall. These disciples had stayed on supporting Immortal Island for so many years, but they didn't even have anyone to send them off. On the contrary, Ling Feng and the other 2 had Yu Qianqiu and Furong to send them off. Seeing this miserable scene, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sigh at the fickleness of the cultivation world. One of the 2 disciples from the Secular Objects Hall was Qing Gingqing. Yu Qianqiu smiled at him and said, "The 3 of them have lived in the same courtyard with me for many years." You have also seen them many times, so you can be considered acquaintances. Please take care of them on the way. They have old friends in the capital that they are going to seek refuge with. If it is convenient, try to get them to stay close to the capital. I know. You are so garrulous like an old woman. Qing punched him, and at the same time, he looked at Furong behind Qing meaningfully and shook his head with a smile. Ling Feng and the other two bowed gratefully and said, "Thank you, martial uncle, for sending us off." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at Qing. "Don't thank me, thank him. We still need him to take care of us on the way. Go. Don't listen to him. Hurry up and go up. There are people watching over there." Qing pouted in the direction of Penglai Pavilion and pushed the three of them onto the flying magic tool. After watching a stream of light fly into the sky, Yu Qianqiu led Furong back to the small courtyard on his sword. With the three of them gone, the place suddenly felt a lot more deserted. Yu Qianqiu sat down on the stone bench and pulled Furong onto his lap. Feeling the elasticity of the heavy weight, he wrapped his arms around her slender waist and caressed her. The latter panicked and pressed his hand down, saying, "Qianqiu, don't. Someone will see." "So it's like that." Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while and suddenly carried her up, saying, "Then let's go to my room. No one will see there." This caused the latter to scream in fear. Rushing into the room, he closed the door with his foot and threw Furong onto the bed. The two of them laughed and played with each other until their clothes were in a mess. In the end, they had touched all the places they wanted to touch. However, Yu Qianqiu still did not take off her clothes to make the final breakthrough. It was not that he did not want to do it, but when he wanted to do it, Furong always said that she was afraid. Therefore Yu Qianqiu vowed, "I won't force you. When you are not afraid one day, tell me." From then on, every time this happened, Yu Qianqiu would want to slap himself twice. He really didn't know if he was possessed or what was going on. He actually made such an oath, and now he could only slap himself. Thinking about how he was still a virgin after coming to this world for so long, damn. Furong, who was blushing, lazily lay in Yu Qianqiu's arms and said, "Qianqiu, Father wants me to tell you that Fuxian Island will send more disciples to the Cultivation Alliance in a while." Cultivation Alliance? Yu Qianqiu's expression darkened. He sat up. Back in Ong Kwangtsung, after his master Hao Sansi was killed by the Deluo sect, he had handed the matter over to the Cultivation Alliance to handle. In the end, it was left unsettled. He still remembered it. In front of the Pillar of State General's residence in the capital of Wuxia Empire, a dozen travel-worn people gathered at the entrance. They sized up the extraordinary residence and looked at the three people in front of them in confusion. The person in the lead walked up and knocked on the door knocker. After a while, the door was opened. A servant who was guarding the door walked out and asked with a frown, "Who are you looking for?" "We are looking for the third young master of your residence, Shi Xiaotian." The person in the lead smiled and said. The servant looked at them again and asked doubtfully, "Do you know our third young master?" "No, we don't. Please help us inform him that his old friend, Yu Qianqiu, asked us to personally bring something to him." Yu Qianqiu? The servant scratched his head as if he had heard this name before, but he could not remember where. However, his attitude immediately became much better. He nodded and said, "Please wait for a moment, I will go inform him now." After saying that, he closed the door again. The crowd did not wait for long before they heard hurried running sounds from inside. Someone shouted, open the door and welcome the guest." The person outside the door immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 137. The group of people at the entrance was none other than the disciples of Supporting Immortals Island who had failed to reach Foundation establishment and were expelled from the sect. Leading them was Ling Feng and the other two. They followed Yu Qianqiu's instructions and brought them to the Pillar General's residence. Most of these people had spiritual roots and were brought to Supporting Immortals Island from a young age. Many years had passed, and the youngest among them had not interacted with the secular world for close to 20 years. They were expelled from the sect and had nowhere to go. With Ling Feng and the other two leading the way, they naturally followed them. However, Ling Feng and the other two did not tell them that they were under Yu Qianqiu's arrangements. When they heard the conversation between Ling Feng and the gatekeeper and found out that Yu Qianqiu was involved, they looked at each other in astonishment. Seeing such a rich and powerful residence, the three of them could not help but feel a trace of apprehension. They were a little suspicious of Yu Qianqiu's words. The Pillar General was similar to the Wei and Ping generals. The military power of the Wuxia Empire was divided among the three of them. Their status was not something ordinary people could hope to achieve. They had heard of this before and did not believe that Yu Qianqiu would be related to such a person. However, since things had come to this, they could only brace themselves and give it a try. When they heard the shout from inside, the three of them finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was clear that Xianxia's name was indeed effective. The vermilion-red door of the residence let out a dull sound and quickly opened. 2 rows of servants stood on either side. A handsome young man with a golden crown in his hair and embroidered robes with a jade belt around his waist walked out and looked around joyfully. When he saw the travel-worn appearance of the group, he was slightly taken aback. He paused for a moment before asking doubtfully, "I am Xuanhuan. Are you all looking for me?" When he heard the servant's report, he did not think much of it. He felt that the servant was looking down on him. At this moment he also suspected that these people were sent by that person. Otherwise, why would they be in such a sorry state? After being in a rich and powerful family for so long, he had forgotten how he looked when he returned from Guangcang. He was even worse than them. The expression of the servant who went to report sank. They had actually lied to him. They grew up overseas and did not have much experience. This was the first time they saw such a dignified young master. Looking at themselves, they felt a little resentful. Ling Feng cupped his fist and said, "You are Xuanhuan. It is Uncle Master Yu Qianqiu who ordered us to find you." "Uncle Master?" Xiaotian looked him up and down. He seemed to be slightly older than Yu Qianqiu. He was a little worried, so he probed, "Where are you from?" "Supporting Immortals Island," Ling Feng said with a little pride. As soon as he said this, everyone became confident. Although they were expelled from the sect, the position of the sect was enough for them to be proud of. The name of the number 1 sect in the cultivation world was not just for show. Sure, sect of sect. Of the sect of the other sect. Excited. Sure, sect out of the sect, disciple sect of the sect of the sect of the other of sect. As he spoke, he looked at the servants on both sides, extended his hand and made an inviting gesture. "This is not the place to talk. Everyone please follow me." The decency of a wealthy family in the secular world was indeed a big blow to these people. It was a completely different concept from the fairyland of the supporting Immortals Island. Perhaps it was because they had stayed in the supporting Immortals Island for a long time, but their sense of beauty had completely changed. They were a little surprised by the luxury of the general's residence. They constantly looked around and praised in their hearts. Sure, Xiaotian didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. Not only did he lead the way, he also kept making inviting gestures. Sometimes, the servants passing by couldn't help but glance at him. Why was the third young master so polite to a bunch of country bumpkins? The former led everyone to the back garden where Yu Qianqiu used to live. However, it had become his residence now, and the garden was still a forbidden area. Other than him, no one was allowed to enter. In the small courtyard of the back garden, the pile of spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu left for him was still there. Even though everyone came from the world's number 1 cultivation sect, they had never seen such a big pile of spirit stones before. Moreover, these were just some ordinary disciples. They were all speechless. As expected of a wealthy family, even the spirit stones were exposed so casually. However, they didn't know Xiaotian's pain. Seeing these spirit stones every day was torture to him. In the cultivation world it was a good thing, but in the secular world, people would have to think twice before exchanging it for a meal. Moreover, Xiaotian hadn't built his foundation, so he didn't dare to absorb the spiritual energy inside. Normally he only dared to look at it but didn't dare to use it. After inviting the guests from the supporting Immortals Island to sit in the hall, Xiaotian impatiently asked Ling Feng, "Old, why didn't your martial uncle you come? What did he ask you to bring me?" The first thing that came to his mind was the foundation building pill. Ling Feng told him what Yu Qianqiu wanted him to find Xiaotian. Then he took out the porcelain bottle that he carefully kept and gave it to Xiaotian. Once Xiaotian received it, he immediately opened the seal and poured the contents into his palm a few times. However, he realized that there was nothing inside. He couldn't help but look at Ling Feng in confusion. Ling Feng and the other two's expressions changed as well. It was actually an empty bottle. Yu Qianqiu actually asked them to bring an empty bottle as a gift? Xiaotian squinted his eyes and looked into the bottle. There was indeed nothing inside. He then put it under his nose and sniffed it. He couldn't help but frown. There was nothing inside other than the smell of blood. He slowly raised his head and looked at the crowd. He said indifferently, "What is the meaning of this? Are you trying to fool me? Or is the thing inside the bottle being hidden by someone? Give me an explanation." He had been a person of status for a long time. When he was serious, he could indeed put some pressure on others. The atmosphere in the hall became heavy. The other disciples also looked at Ling Feng and the other two. Ling Feng snatched the bottle from his hand. After checking it again, he realized that there was nothing inside. He muttered, "How can this be? I've never opened the bottle before. Could it be that martial uncle you gave us an empty bottle? He came all the way here to deliver such a small empty bottle? Do you really think I'm an idiot?" Shi Xiaotian glanced at everyone coldly and said in a deep voice, "I think everyone should first prove your identity. Otherwise, my general's residence isn't a place that you can come and go as you please." "But who are you people? How do you know that I know you, Qianzhou?" he shouted. "Yo, I haven't seen you for a few years. Your temper has grown." Suddenly, a mocking voice came from the back of the hall. Shi Xiaotian suddenly turned around and shouted, "Who is it? Get out here." Following a burst of laughter, a person swayed out from the back of the hall. He stared at Shi Xiaotian with a smile and sighed. "You have guts. You actually dare to speak to me like this. What? Can't you recognize my voice after being separated for a few years?" Ah. Everyone stood up. This person wasn't a stranger to everyone. He was a famous person on supporting Immortals Island. He was once an honored guest of the State Pillar General's residence. He was Yu Qianzhou. All the disciples bowed and said, "Martial Uncle Yu." Ling Feng and the other two looked at him in disbelief. Wasn't he on supporting Immortals Island? How did he come here in a blink of an eye? Boss. Shi Xiaotian said in shock. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. He turned to Shi Xiaotian and patted his shoulder with a smile. "Young man, you have quite a temper. How dare you shout at me?" Shi Xiaotian stuttered for a long time. In the end, he bowed with a surprised expression. "Boss." Yu Qianzhou turned around with a smile. He walked to the chair in the main hall and sat down. He looked at everyone. Chapter 138. Seeing everyone's doubtful expressions, Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly. In fact, he had already heard the conversation between him and Shi Xiaotian. His gaze landed on the porcelain bottle in Ling Feng's hand, and his smile widened. He had been cultivating arduously for more than a year, trying to make various breakthroughs. One time he had cultivated the Guiyuan sword technique, wanting to make a breakthrough, but in his anxiety he had ended up injuring himself. When he returned to supporting Immortal Island, he realized that there were bloodstains on his clothes, so he casually tossed them down the Alchemy Pavilion's mountain and did not take it to heart. A few days later, when he was cultivating in Utopia, he unintentionally realized that he could sense the scene in an unfamiliar place outside. This feeling could only be felt when he had entered Utopia the last time. Curious, he locked onto it with his divine sense and tried using the method to exit. In the end, he discovered that he was already in the back mountain of the Alchemy Pavilion. When he discovered the bloodstained shirt that he had abandoned previously, he immediately thought of a possibility. He reckoned that it was a benefit brought about by his cultivation breaking through again. Therefore he dripped his blood in several places on supporting Immortal Island to test it out. Indeed, he could easily sense the surroundings of every drop of blood essence in Utopia. After repeated attempts, he could use Utopia as a medium to quickly appear where there was blood essence. The porcelain bottle that he had asked Ling Feng and the other two to bring did not contain anything other than a drop of his blood essence. His main purpose was to test Utopia's long-distance teleportation ability. He had asked the three of them to bring that drop of blood essence to the National Pillar General's residence, which was why he could appear here. Of course, this was his secret, and it was not convenient for him to let the people in front of him know. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Ling Feng and the other two and said indifferently, "Ling Feng, I remember the three of you saying that as long as I can help you succeed in building your foundation, you'll be willing to listen to my orders. Does that still count?" The three of them looked at each other and thought about how Yu Qianzhou had been able to leave supporting Immortal Island secretly and appear here silently. Since he had such means, he was definitely not lying about building his foundation. Therefore they bowed in unison and said, "Of course it counts." The other disciples were shocked when they heard that Yu Qianzhou could actually help the three of them build their foundation. For a moment, everyone's thoughts became active, and they looked at the three of them enviously. Shi Xiaotian was also a little excited. Since Boss had the ability to help them build their foundations, he would naturally be able to help himself. However, he had been with Yu Qianzhou for more than a year and was very familiar with him. He knew that there was more to this sentence. Yu Qianzhou nodded. He looked at the others and smiled. "What are your plans? Are you willing to serve me like the other three?" Everyone looked at each other, their expressions becoming excited. Someone stepped forward and bowed, saying, Martial Uncle Yu, if you can guarantee that this disciple will successfully build his foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle's orders. I always pay what I say. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, if you can't successfully build your foundation, you naturally don't need to listen to my orders, and you also don't need to take my words seriously. Go do what you need to do. Is there anyone among you who is willing to be like him? As he said that, he took out a few foundation-building pills that were shrouded in purple mist. Everyone's eyes lit up. Apart from Shi Xiaotian, everyone had seen them before, so they naturally knew that these were foundation-building pills. Shi Xiaotian also naturally understood from everyone's gazes. In an instant, the crowd's emotions flared up. Who wouldn't want to make such a foolproof deal? Even if they couldn't successfully build their foundation, they wouldn't lose anything. They immediately stepped forward and bowed, saying, if we can successfully build our foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle Yu's orders. Since there were foundation-building pills, boss definitely wouldn't forget about them. Shi Xiaotian stood at the side very confidently, not saying a word. Good. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, but he snorted coldly in his heart. As expected, they were all people who refused to suffer losses. Each of them emphasized that they would only listen to his orders after they successfully built their foundation. They all thought that he was a philanthropist. Very good. He placed the few foundation-building pills in his hand on the tea table beside him, then he took out a whole bunch and placed them on the table, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, words are no proof. Those who are willing to listen to my orders will first take one as proof. If one foundation-building pill is not enough, you can still come to me to take it. As he said that, he took out another handful from his storage bag. Shi Xiaotian's jaw dropped as he watched. He thought to himself, boss is indeed boss. The foundation-building pills that An Kuangtsung treats as treasure are actually given out by boss as wedding candies. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Finally, someone couldn't resist the temptation and walked over to Yu Qianqiu and bowed deeply. When the latter nodded, he excitedly took one and retreated to the side, as if he was afraid that someone would snatch it from him. Sometimes one was afraid that no one would take the lead. Since someone took the lead, everyone would naturally follow suit, taking turns to bow and salute, then unceremoniously took the pills and retreated. In the blink of an eye, there were only 11 foundation-building pills left on the tea table. Yu Qianqiu looked at Shi Xiaotian, Ling Feng, and the other two who didn't follow the crowd's bad example. He smiled and said, Xiaodan, take the foundation-building pills on the table and share them with those 3 brothers. For people actually had to share 11 foundation-building pills. Everyone's face was filled with envy. Yes. Such a good thing. Shi Xiaotian couldn't hold back the smile on his face anymore. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue, no longer looking like a noble young master. Holding the foundation-building pills in his hand, he walked in front of Ling Feng and the other 2. Without saying a word, he gave each of them 3 foundation-building pills. He held 2 and was about to retreat. Who knew that the 3 of them wouldn't take it? They each wanted to give one to Shi Xiaotian, but the latter was determined not to accept it. Looking at the adult version of Kong Rong, Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. This daddy here has plenty of foundation-building pills, why do I need you guys to be good people? His face darkened and he shouted, alright, stop being disgusting. The 4 of them retreated embarrassedly. Yu Qianqiu stood up and looked around at everyone. Expressionlessly he said, I don't like empty promises. The foundation-building pills in everyone's hands are proof of my advance payment. But, you guys can't just say empty promises. You have to show me some sincerity. What do you guys say? Everyone looked at each other. They were all disciples who were chased out of Fuxian Island. Other than the pitiful amount of spirit stones they had, they really couldn't take out anything else to show their sincerity. They didn't know what to say. There really wasn't a free lunch in this world. Shi Xiaotian looked at the foundation-building pills in his hand. His face twitched unnaturally. Just as he took a step forward and called out, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, we'll talk about the 4 of you later. Nobody said anything. Yu Qianqiu crossed his arms in front of his chest and smiled. Then I'll take the initiative to ask you guys for something. Something that all of you have, how about it? Something that everyone has? Everyone looked at themselves and suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. A disciple came out and bowed. Uncle Master Yu, I wonder what we have that can catch your eye? Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not interested in your body parts. I just want something that doesn't matter. For example. Yu Qianqiu paused and smiled. For example, give me your natal primordial spirit. With this proof I can be at ease. What? Everyone exclaimed. Their faces turned pale. If they handed over their natal primordial spirit, wouldn't their lives be in danger? That disciple bowed again and said, Uncle Master, you're joking too much. If that's the case, then I don't want this foundation building pill anymore. As he spoke, he walked to the side of the tea table and returned the foundation establishment pill. Then a few more people gritted their teeth and walked out to return the foundation building pill. The rest of them were obviously hesitant. Xianxia looked at them coldly and suddenly laughed. You guys really don't stand on ceremony. You guys take my things as you please and return them as you please. Since you guys don't stand on ceremony, then I won't stand on ceremony either. All of you who took my foundation building pill, leave your natal primordial spirit behind. Don't even think about leaving. Just as he finished speaking, among the people who were still holding onto the foundation building pill, someone suddenly leaped out of the hall. In the blink of an eye, he was about to jump over the wall. It seemed like he wanted to escape with the pill. Xianxia snorted coldly and narrowed his eyes. Chapter 139. Clang. A cold light suddenly flashed in front of everyone's eyes, heading straight for the disciple who was about to jump over the wall. The cold light pierced through the person's figure, causing a flower of blood to blossom in the air. The disciple lost his balance and let out a miserable scream that echoed throughout the general's residence. Before the scream had even subsided, a second, third, fourth, one after another, cold lights flashed out from the hall. Their target was still the disciple who was still in the air. Nearly 100 cold lights swarmed over like a flock of crows fighting for food. In a few blinks of an eye, the scream stopped and the disciple could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a bloody mist in the air. The cold lights were faintly discernible, and occasionally pieces of cloth would fall. Suddenly, nearly 100 cold lights seemed to have received an order and shot out from the bloody mist, shooting into the hall. Everyone followed the direction of the cold lights, and one by one, they entered the storage pouch on Xianxia's waist. One of the cold lights slowed down and turned into a flying sword that flew around Xianxia's body. After a few rounds, it flipped over and with a clang sound, it went straight into the sword sheath on Xianxia's back. Heavens! Only now did everyone realize that the nearly 100 cold lights were all flying swords. They had never seen anyone control so many flying swords at once. A gust of wind blew outside, causing the leaves on the trees in the courtyard to rustle. Everyone looked over and saw the bloody mist being blown away by the wind. The scattered pieces of cloth on the ground were blown away, and the walls were dyed with a layer of blood. A thought flashed through everyone's mind. Not a single corpse left. Xianxia stared at the blood stains on the wall and the pieces of cloth on the ground. He felt slightly regretful. The power of these 100 flying swords was far from what he had imagined. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any blood stains and pieces of cloth left behind. They should have all been turned into ashes. What happened just now, although it was said to be slow, it was actually only a matter of a few moments. The hall became completely silent. None of the disciples dared to make a sound. They were all intimidated by the power of the group of swords. Those who had the same thought turned pale and completely gave up. They knew that there was no way they could escape this kind of attack. Was this the power of a foundation establishment cultivator? Xianhuan looked at the silent Xianxia and clenched his fists tightly. His face was flushed and he was actually trembling with excitement. The goal that the two of them had been fighting for many years had been realized by boss before him. Who dares to fight here? Do you want to die? A loud shout rang out, and then 7 figures appeared on the courtyard wall. 7 middle-aged men in plain robes with sharp eyes stood on the wall of the courtyard and observed the situation inside. Do you want to die? Xianxia was slightly annoyed. 7 cold rays of light shot out from his storage bag at lightning speed towards the 7 of them. Xianxian suddenly shouted, "Boss, help!" The 7 flying swords were pressed against the throats of those 7 people. If Xianxian had not shouted in time, there would have been a bloody hole in their necks. The faces of the 7 people on the wall immediately turned ashen, not daring to move. How could a person who could use a flying sword be ordinary? Xianxia coldly stared at Xianxian. The latter smiled bitterly and begged, "Boss, please let them go. They are not ordinary servants, they are the retainers of the general's estate. They have been loyal to my family for generations and are my father's most trusted subordinates. They have been protecting the safety of the estate and my family for a long time. They didn't mean to offend you, boss." Xianxia thought about it and felt that it made sense. They had probably rushed over after hearing that disciple scream. He looked back at the 7 people on the wall and saw that they were all standing there, giving off the airs of heroes. However, their faces were pale from fear. He nodded slightly and said, "Tell them not to tell anyone about what happened here." The 7 cold rays of light returned to his storage bag. "Don't worry, boss. They will know even if you don't tell them." Xiaotian turned around and walked into the courtyard. He cupped his hands towards the 7 people on the wall and said, "7 uncles, please leave. There is nothing wrong here, don't worry." The 7 of them also knew the rules of the estate. No one was allowed to come here. If they hadn't heard the scream, they wouldn't have rushed over. The leader in the middle looked at the bloodstains at his feet. He looked at Yu Qianzhou, who was sitting high up in the hall, and bowed to Xiaotian. "Third young master, be careful. We will leave first." The 7 of them returned to the courtyard. This was just a small episode. When Xiaotian turned around and returned to the hall, he was instantly stunned. There was a big group of people just now, but now only Yu Qianzhou and Ling Feng were left. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at Yu Qianzhou in shock. Just now Yu Qianzhou's figure flashed through the crowd, and everywhere he went, people disappeared into thin air. More than 10 people disappeared just like that? They could see it clearly, but they were confused by it. Ling Feng pointed at the place where the people disappeared and said in shock, "Martial uncle, don't worry, they are fine. I just sent them to another place." Yu Qianzhou smiled. These people were all Qin Feng's assistants. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Qin Feng to guarantee the logistics of the small army alone. After sending them to Utopia, his sister would naturally control their natal primordial spirits first. "Martial uncle, this. The 3 of them clearly found it hard to accept this reality. "Alright, you don't have to call me martial uncle anymore. Just call me boss like little Tian." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand. "Moreover, I have already reached the core formation stage. Calling me martial uncle is a bit outdated. I should be calling you grandmaster. But you are no longer disciples of Fuxian Island, so you can forget about calling me grandmaster. Just call me boss." The 4 of them were stunned. He had already reached the core formation stage? Xiaotian said in surprise, "Boss, you have really reached the core formation stage?" Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes at him and waved his hand. "Let's not talk about this. While I am here, I can protect you. The 4 of you should hurry up and build your foundation. After that, I have something for you to do." The 4 of them nodded in surprise and sat down cross-legged in the hall. They consumed the pills and focused on refining them. Not long after, the painful process of building their foundation gradually appeared on the 4 of them. Yu Qianzhou sat down at the side and looked at the 4 of them silently. He already had plans for the 4 of them. He needed them to run around and do some things for him outside. As long as they did not enter Utopia, there was no need to strip away their natal primordial spirits. Otherwise, it would be easy for people with high cultivation levels to see through them. As for Xiaotian, he had entered Utopia once, but he had been trapped in an array and did not know anything. Among the 4 of them, Xiaotian was the most talented. Yu Qianzhou gave him another foundation establishment pill and he succeeded in building his foundation with only 3. Although Ling Feng and Bei Zi had succeeded with 3 pills each, they had also used 3 pills on the supporting immortal island. Lu Xianping, on the other hand, had to use 5 pills to succeed. Xiaotian did not say anything. After Ling Feng and Bei Zi succeeded, they tried their best to suppress their excitement. They knelt in front of Yu Qianzhou and said some words of gratitude. Xianping, who succeeded in the end, kowtowed 3 times without saying a word. Then Xiaotian led the 3 of them to wash up and stood in front of Yu Qianzhou in high spirits. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at Yu Qianzhou as if they were looking at their parents again. It was difficult for outsiders to understand their feelings of being pulled back from the brink of despair. However, this was what Yu Qianzhou needed after years of planning. "This is a storage bag for you." Yu Qianzhou threw a bag to Xiaotian. When Xiaotian caught it, he was stunned at first. Then he burst into laughter and thanked him profusely. "Thank you, boss. Thank you, boss." He had been drooling over this legendary item for a long time. "What are you laughing at?" Yu Qianzhou's words immediately made him stand to the side, but he still kept touching the bag in his hand. Yu Qianzhou tapped his finger on the tea table beside him and pointed at the 4 jade archives, 4 large porcelain bottles and 4 swords on the table. The jade disc contains supporting immortal islands, supporting immortal sword technique, and the bottle contains vitality pills. Each of you take them and cultivate diligently. Don't be lazy. The 4 of them were pleasantly surprised. They had just built their foundation and now Yu Qianzhou had prepared everything they needed. Where else could they find such a good boss? The 4 of them took their things and thanked him profusely. Xiaotian laughed so hard that he almost fainted. He hugged the pile of things, his mouth wide open. Happiness came too suddenly, and there was nothing he could do about it. However, he did not notice that Xianxia's expression gradually darkened when he saw Shi Xiaoyan's behavior. Chapter 140. Ling Feng tugged at him and Shi Xiaoyan immediately reacted. He smiled awkwardly and placed the items in his hands into his storage pouch. Frivolous. Xianxia harumphed and looked at them for a while before saying, "There are some things I need you to do. Ling Feng, the three of you will stay here for now. Once your cultivation reaches a certain level, the three of you will split up and travel around the Wuxia Empire, cultivating while traveling. First, to broaden your horizons, and second, to gather some disciples with spiritual roots. Don't worry about what I do. In short, as long as they are not affiliated with any sect, regardless of their age, bring them all here. The more the better, I have a use for them. Remember, try to keep a low profile and don't let the other sects find out. Oh right, if you don't have any money in the secular world, you can ask little Tian for it. I believe the general's mansion is not short of money. This is what I want the three of you to do, don't slack off." Shi Xiaoyan's face twitched unnaturally. Ling Feng and the other two looked at each other. Traveling and cultivating at the same time, there was actually such a good thing. However, from Xianxia's expression, it seemed like this matter was very important. They immediately cupped their fists and said, "Boss, we understand." Xianxia nodded and took out 4 small silver balls. He passed them to the 4 and said, "These are hollow inside. I have placed something inside. If you encounter danger outside and can't save yourself, you can use your divine sense to check. When the time comes, someone will come to save you. Remember to keep it well." Something that could save lives was indeed a good thing. The 4 carefully kept it. Shi Xiaoyan looked at the 3 of them. It seemed like they had all been assigned tasks except for him. This was too much of a blow to his confidence. He couldn't help but ask, "Boss, what should I do?" Xianxia glanced at him and said coldly, "Go do what you need to do. Do your old profession." Shi Xiaoyan was startled and said, "Boss, what old profession do I have?" "Yes, why not?" Xianxia patted his shoulder and said, "Your matter is very important. You should use your identity as the general's 3rd young master to befriend the nobles in the capital. Don't neglect eating, drinking, and playing." Ling Feng and the other 2 turned their heads to the side. Shi Xiaoyan's face darkened and he said stiffly, "Boss, you call this a very important matter?" "Yes, very important." Xianxia glared fiercely at him, his expression solemn as he said, "I want you to thoroughly investigate all the officials of the 5th rank and above in the Wuxia Empire as well as their families. Then record everything down for me." As he spoke, he handed several jade archives to Miao Yi. Shi Xiaoyan took the jade archive and stood rooted to the ground. A thought flashed through his mind. Was Boss planning to rebel? Otherwise, why would a cultivator want this thing? Seeing his expression, Xianxia knew what he was thinking. He smiled and said, "Don't think too much. It's not what you think. You'll know when the time comes. All right, I still have some matters to attend to. Just do as I say." Hearing his words, Shi Xiaoyan felt relieved. He cupped his fists at Ling Feng and the other 2 and said, "Understood." Another night passed and the sky outside was already beginning to brighten. Xianxia walked into the courtyard, and the long sword on his back was unsheathed with a chong sound. With his hands behind his back, he turned into a streak of light and flew away. The 4 who were sending him off were fascinated by the sight. Shi Xiaoyan even cried out, "Boss, you're too awesome. This won't do. I must learn this as soon as possible." On a mountaintop on the outskirts of the capital, Xianxia stood silently for a long while. His body was already drenched from the dew. At this moment, the rays of the rising sun were so blinding that he had to close his eyes. He stood there waiting for the sun to rise. Everything was bathed in a layer of gold. He turned to look at the densely populated capital of Wuxia and mumbled, "So many beauties have fallen to the hands of countless heroes. Since the heavens sent me here, I'd be letting myself down if I don't do something. Xiaoyan, if you were to sit on the throne one day, I wonder how you'd feel?" Facing the rising sun, he stretched lazily. Thinking about the place he was going to, he couldn't help but feel a little excited. Time really passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost 10 years. He wondered how his father, who had helped him clean up the murder scene, was doing. And that crybaby mother. Xianxia grinned, and a hint of anticipation appeared on his face. He unsheathed his long sword and left with him. In a small forest outside Swallow City, Xianxia took a look at the surroundings. It seemed like this was the place where he had opened his eyes back then. He slowly walked out and walked toward the ancient city gate where people and carriages came and went. It was very familiar and not much had changed. It was still the same. It was rare for him to come out, and now that he could use the kinesis flight technique, transportation was much more convenient. This time he wanted to go home to take a look. Walking on the streets of Swallow City, there were all kinds of shops and it was a bustling scene. Xianxia sighed with emotion as he relived this familiar scene. Suddenly he realized that many people were looking at him with strange gazes. He thought to himself, it's impossible that they know me. I left home at the age of 16, and it's been almost 10 years since then. My appearance has changed a lot. Thinking about it, he felt relieved. It was probably because he was carrying a sword on his back and carrying a bag on his waist that looked a little weird. If he had known earlier, he would have kept it first. He came to a stop in front of a rich and powerful mansion. The plaque on the door read Yu Manor in gold. He had finally arrived home. Looking at the bright and clean appearance of the house, it was obvious that there were no signs of decline. It was easy to imagine that the family head here had taken good care of the whole house. Climbing up the steps, just as he was about to enter, he saw the servant guarding the door walk out and block him with hostility. He shouted, "Where did you come from, evil person?" Xianxia was stunned. He was actually blocked by a servant when he entered his own house. His gaze followed the servant's gaze and landed on the hilt of the sword on his back. F***ck. A person carrying a sword is an evil person? Isn't this servant's foresight a little too bad? What's wrong with father? Why did he choose such a person to guard the door? Damn it, you even dare to block the eldest young master's way. I'll fire you later. Just as he was about to lose his temper, he remembered that this was his own house. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. I didn't think that after leaving home for almost 10 years, I wouldn't even be able to enter the house. Who are you? I remember that Uncle Fu used to be the gatekeeper. Hearing him say this, the servant was stunned as well. He looked him up and down, and only then did he realize that there was some resemblance between his brows and the old master's. Bewildered, he asked, You're the eldest young master? I am. Xianxia nodded and smiled. He then asked, Who are you? I haven't seen you before. Only now did the servant realize that he had provoked the eldest young master. He stuttered for a while before bowing and saying, Uncle Fu is my father, this little one is Fu Qing. Saying this, he quickly opened the door and said, Eldest young master, please come in. As soon as he finished speaking, Fu Qing ran into the mansion while shouting, Eldest young master is back, eldest young master is back. Xianxia was stunned. Damn it. Why did he have to be so ostentatious? Then he shook his head with a bitter smile and walked in. The result of Fu Qing's loud shout was that the richest mansion in Swallow City immediately boiled over. Xianxia walked through the porch and came to the courtyard. He saw a group of people coming out of the main hall. He could vaguely recognize some of them as relatives of his family. The man and woman standing at the front were none other than his father and mother. Xianxia was a little excited. He strode forward and knelt down in front of the two. He kowtowed 3 times and said, Son Xianxia greets father and mother. Chapter 141. 2 pairs of hands helped him up. It was his parents. The family of 3 looked at each other. Xianxia, whose sideburns already had some gray hair, held his arm and patted his shoulders saying, It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. Xuanhuan threw herself into his arms and started crying. She wailed, It's all your father's fault. My son has been gone for so many years. Xianxia scratched his head and awkwardly looked at his father, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He then pushed Xuanhuan away and said, Mother, don't cry. I'm back now. Xianxia's eyes were a little red. He pulled his wife away from his son and said, What are you doing? Why are you crying as soon as your son is back? Aren't you purposely making your son worry? Xuanhuan struggled free and pulled Xianxia. She cried, It's good that you're back. You have to save your younger brother. You have to save your younger brother. The crying stopped abruptly. Xuanhuan was so sad that she fainted. Xianxia was shocked. He quickly held his mother and carried her. He walked towards his parents' room with familiarity. The group of people followed behind him. When they reached his parents' room, he placed his mother on the bed. He grabbed his mother's hands and infused 2 streams of vital energy into his mother's body, quickly dispersing the pent-up air in her chest. Xuanhuan slowly woke up. When she saw Xianxia, she started crying again. She was already crying like this. If she cried any more, she would hurt her spirit. Xianxia immediately placed a finger on his mother's forehead. Xuanhuan immediately fell asleep. Yu Qianzhou heaved a sigh of relief and shouted, "Someone!" A young maidservant looked at the silent old master and trembled as she walked to Yu Qianzhou's side and said timidly, "Eldest young master." Yu Qianzhou took out an origin chi pill and handed it to her. "When Madam wakes up, dissolve this pill in a bowl of warm water and feed it to Madam. Don't forget." The maid quickly complied. Yu Qianzhou had been doing business for so many years. At this time, his attention had always been on his son. He saw that his son was nimble in ordering people around. His expression and behavior vaguely had the aura of a superior. He also had a few methods to treat his wife. Obviously he had lived a good life outside. When he left he was only 16 years old. Now his bearing was steady and his face resolute. The immaturity of the past had faded, and he was already an adult. "Is your mother okay?" "I'm fine. I'm just a little sad. I'll be fine after taking some medicine." Yu Qianzhou stood up and turned around. He stared at his father and frowned. "Father, did I hear wrongly? Mother seemed to have asked me to save my younger brother. What's going on?" He didn't know that in the second year after he left, after giving birth to her first child, Xuanhuan, who had been infertile for many years, actually gave birth to a younger brother. Yu Qianzhou sighed. His eldest son left, but God gave him a younger son. It could be said that it was God's will. But this matter of the clam-forming pearls was really a little difficult to talk about in front of his son. "Father, what's wrong? Is there something inconvenient to tell your son?" Yu Qianzhou was a little unhappy. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and smiled bitterly. He slowly explained the cause of the matter. "In the second year after you left, your mother gave birth to a younger brother. His name is Wuxiao. He is now 8 years old. But a few days ago, your younger brother suddenly disappeared. Yesterday, someone sent a letter saying that your younger brother had been kidnapped by them. They wanted us to prepare 10,000 taels of gold and come to collect it today." Yu Qianzhou nodded his head in acknowledgement. He indeed didn't expect to have a younger brother. But the two of them had been married for a long time. When he left, they weren't even 40 years old. It wasn't strange for them to have another child. But what was wrong with the Yu clan's descendants? The eldest was kidnapped once and now the second was kidnapped again. Were the Yu clan's descendants so easy to kidnap? Who knew if there would be more thieves? It seems like the Yu clan's wealth is something that people are jealous of. Mother's maiden family has no one left. I wonder if our Yu clan's relatives, it's really hard to say. I believe father isn't a foolish person and should have some idea. Yu Qianzhou sneered. Just now, he seemed to have seen a large group of Yu clan's relatives. When they saw him, some of them had strange expressions. Yu Qianzhou said in a gloomy tone, "I already had my suspicions. Some people probably think that I only know how to do business and not kill people. I know you're not a good person. Otherwise your business wouldn't be so big." Yu Qianzhou smirked and asked, "Did the kidnappers report their names?" "No." Yu Qianzhou shook his head and said, "They said that they will send someone to check on the ransom today and tell them the location of the transaction. When the time comes, they will hand over the kidnappers." As he spoke, he suddenly stared at his son and asked, "Qianzhou, you've been cultivating for so many years. Have you learned any immortal techniques?" "I didn't cultivate. That's what soul formation cultivators do. We're just cultivators." Yu Qianzhou smiled. There was no need to tell such words to his father. Of course, he knew what his father was thinking, and it was none other than him trying to utilize some immortal techniques to rescue Xuanhuan. He didn't answer directly and said, "Father, don't worry. As long as my brother is fine, I guarantee that you won't have to pay a single cent and my brother will come back safely." Yu Qianzhou nodded happily. The father and son chatted as they walked out of the bedroom. When they came to the courtyard outside, there was a large group of clan members and servants standing there. Seeing the father and son come out, an old man in the middle who seemed to be the oldest asked, "Qianzhou, how is second mother? Do you need to call a doctor?" Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, "Thank you for asking, clan leader. Second mother is just a little sad. She will be fine after a good sleep. Qianzhou, come and greet clan leader." Yu Qianzhou didn't have a good impression of this group of clan members. In his memory, his father lost his parents and was extremely poor. None of the clan members helped him. Later on, his father received help from his mother's family and relied on his own hard work to have such a large business today. As a result, this group of clan members flocked to him like ducks after hearing the news. They were really powerful. However, the Chinese had a strong sense of clan. Yu Qianzhou didn't want his father to be embarrassed, so he walked over and bowed. Yu Qianzhou greets clan leader. The clan leader nodded and said, I heard that you went out to learn martial arts in the past. I wonder what martial arts you learned? Have you returned after completing your martial arts? Look at the sword on your back. Did you learn some martial arts? Yu Qianzhou knew that his parents didn't spread the news of his cultivation. He smiled indifferently and said, I didn't learn anything practical. I just went out for a walk. I happened to know that some cowardly scoundrels wanted to harm my family, so I specially bought this sword to deter them. The clan leader stroked his long beard and said, Very good. He didn't say anything else. However, a middle-aged man beside him walked to Yu Changwei's side and said darkly, Brother Changwei, I've seen eldest brother's son in the past. Why does he look nothing like him now? Your family is rich, so you have to be careful. What he meant was to tell Yu Changwei that his youngest son had just been kidnapped. His eldest son, whom he hadn't heard from for many years, was here. Furthermore, there was a difference in his appearance. Be careful that someone had designs on your family's wealth. Brother, don't worry. He's definitely my eldest son. Yu Changwei replied in a deep voice. In her heart, she was a little unhappy. How could her own son not know? Not to mention anything else, just based on the fact that her son could say, Mother's maiden family has no one left. I don't know, are you family's ancestral relatives? These words were known to the heavens, the earth, you and I, and only the person involved could understand the profound meaning behind it. It was clear that this was undoubtedly her eldest son. Moreover, as a father, how could he not know the minute details of his son's appearance? Father, who is this elder? Yu Qianzhou looked at that person with interest and asked. Chapter 142. Qianzhou, don't be rude. This is the patriarch's eldest son, Yu Zhangping. In terms of seniority, he is your uncle. Yu Changwei reprimanded. Oh, so it's uncle. Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, Qianzhou greets uncle. I hope uncle doesn't blame nephew for being rude. However, nephew deeply agrees with uncle's words. There must be someone coveting my family's wealth. Nephew firmly believes that there must be a mole in the Yu family, colluding with those villains outside. Otherwise, my younger brother wouldn't have been captured so easily with a few strong subordinates. Uncle, don't you think so? He seemed to be extremely respectful on the surface, yet anyone could discern the targeted intent in his tone. It was as if Yu Zhangping was the mole, and it caused the expressions of the surrounding people to become extremely strange. Yu Zhangping's face twitched as he sternly said, What do you mean by that? Yu Qianzhou glanced at his father and saw that he had actually turned his head to the side as if he didn't hear anything. This further confirmed his guess and he couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha. Uncle, don't misunderstand. It's nothing. I just want to tell everyone as the Yu family's eldest son that since I'm back, anyone who dares to stretch their claws into my family must be prepared to be beheaded. Even if it's the heavenly emperor, haha. I won't let a single one of them go. At the end of his words, the chill in his voice was unmistakable. Yu Zhangping still wanted to say something but was stopped by his father, the Yu family's patriarch. He only heard him say with a smile, Eldest brother is right. If it's really a family thief, we can't let a single one of them go. Yu Qianzhou smiled and saluted him. Patriarch is indeed worthy of being the patriarch, truly wise. Master. Fu Qing hurriedly walked over and said, There are 3 people outside barging in. They say they are second young master's ticket holders. Hearing this, the members of the Yu clan immediately started whispering to each other. Everyone knew that the so-called owner of the ticket was naturally the kidnapper. To actually dare to barge into the Yu clan in broad daylight, his guts were truly too great. Yu Changwei's expression changed and he hurriedly walked towards the courtyard. Yu Qianzhou shook his head slightly. His father was anxious to save his son and had lost his usual calmness. Thereupon the group of people followed him. In the main hall courtyard, 3 burly men saw a group of people coming, but they still stood there with their heads held high. Sure enough, they had the style of kidnappers who wanted money more than their lives. Yu Changwei calmed himself down, walked over and cupped his fists. I am Yu Changwei, may I know which mountain the 3 heroes are from? A rough-looking man on the left cupped his fists and said, Well said. Seeing that Lord Yu is a man who understands the rules, I won't waste any more time. As he spoke, he pointed at the middle-aged man with a gloomy expression and said, This is our octagonal stronghold second leader Wang. Today he's here to compete with Elder Yu's faction. Gong against Gong will be counting the tickets face to face. The so-called counting tickets was to let the victim confirm whether the kidnapper was his man or not. Then the kidnapper would confirm whether the victim was sincere in redeeming the ticket. If there was no sincerity, then the hostage might be killed. Yu Qianqiu slightly narrowed his eyes. Octagonal stronghold again. This daddy almost forgot to settle the score with you guys. Today you guys came to remind me. Very good. Second leader Wang. Yu Changrai cupped his fists. The second leader Wang in the middle did not say a word and only nodded to the man on the right. That man took out a jade pendant from his bosom and handed it to Yu Changrai. When the latter saw the jade pendant, his body swayed and he almost lost his footing. Obviously it was his son's possession. The man on the left chuckled and said, "If Lord Yu has verified it, please bring us to see if the 10,000 taels of gold has been prepared." Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted and unhurriedly walked over and said, "A bunch of reckless fools. 10,000 taels of gold and they still dare to ask for it." As he spoke, he supported his father and walked straight back and said, "Fu Qing, find a chair for master to sit down and rest." The Yu family's group of relatives were somewhat stunned, but since it was none of their business, no one said anything. In the crowd, Yu Zhangping's face flashed with a trace of a sneer. His condescending look immediately angered the two bandits. They immediately reached for the sabers on their waists, wanting to teach Yu Qianqiu a lesson. However, the second leader Wang quickly held them down. When he saw Yu Qianqiu carrying a long sword on his back and a bag on his waist, his pupils fiercely contracted. Fu Qing brought over a chair as instructed. Yu Qianqiu helped his father sit down and said softly, "Father, don't worry for the time being. Leave this matter to me to handle." Yu Changrai grabbed his wrist. Yu Qianqiu lightly pushed him away and shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He turned back to stare at the three bandits and coldly said, 10,000 taels of gold, what can you do if I don't give it to you?" As soon as these words came out, the Yu family's relatives immediately whispered to each other. Wasn't this forcing the kidnappers to kill the hostages? The two bandits who were about to pull out their sabers immediately pulled out their sabers again. Second leader Wang once again held them down and took a deep breath. He didn't dare to be sure before, but now that he heard the other party say such words, he was almost convinced. Second leader Wang took a few steps forward and bowed to Yu Qianqiu. He said in a respectful tone, "Senior is an expert in the cultivation world. It was our fault for offending Senior today. We also don't dare to ask Senior for the 10,000 taels of gold. We will definitely return the people we kidnapped safely. We won't dare to be careless. Please let us go, Senior." The two bandits were immediately stunned. The usually arrogant second leader would actually say such humble words. They wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. The Yu family's relatives were also dumbfounded. How did the kidnappers suddenly apologize? Among the crowd, Yu Changping had an angry expression. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "I didn't expect you to be so perceptive. You actually know about the cultivation world. I can let you go, but you have to answer a question first. If I am satisfied with your answer, I will let you go. Otherwise, if you make me unhappy, I will definitely raze your Octagon village to the ground." Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The Octagon village was a place that even the government couldn't raze to the ground. Yu Qianqiu's words were too arrogant. However, what did they mean by the cultivation world? Everyone was confused. Yu Changrai, who was sitting on a chair, once again sized up his son's proud back. "Senior, please ask." Second leader Wang bowed respectfully. "Tell me who the Yu family is colluding with. Don't tell me you didn't, or the consequences will be very serious." Yu Qianqiu said lightly. Yu Changping, who was in the crowd, trembled. He looked at his father, the clan leader. This. Second leader Wang had a difficult expression on his face. The rough-looking subordinate behind him walked out, cupped his fists and said casually, "Young senior, you don't have to make things difficult for our second leader. We can't talk about this. We have our own rules. If we tell you who the client is, then how will our Octagon village be able to maintain its reputation in the future? How will we be able to continue living in the underworld?" Before he could finish his words, they heard the sound of a sword ring. Everyone saw a flash of light in front of them, and then the bandit lost his voice on the spot. His head was tossed high into the air, separated from his shoulders. Warm blood spurted from the severed head, and when the blood ran dry, his body swayed and fell to the ground. That light transformed into a flying sword and circled around Yu Qianqiu a few times before returning to its scabbard. "Murder!" Everyone cried out in shock. Yu Qianqiu turned around and glanced at them. He said coldly, "If you want to die, then scream as loud as you can." Just this sentence alone caused everyone to fall silent. They had just witnessed the flying sword kill someone. Who would dare to go against his words? A certain father and son were shivering in fear. "Brother!" The remaining two bandits cried out in grief. One of them hugged the dead body while second leader Wang hugged his head. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and shouted angrily, "There are rules in the cultivation world. We are not allowed to meddle in worldly affairs. Why did you kill us mortals?" Yu Qianzhou sneered, "Humph, you seem to know quite a lot. How strange. You kidnapped my younger brother and now you're trying to reason with me? What kind of logic is that? Forget it, I won't be able to get anything out of you. I believe you have a first leader, right? I'd better go to the Octagon village myself." As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold glints shot out from the storage pouch. 2 mournful screams rang out, then stopped abruptly. The cold glints disappeared into the red, and the thick smell of blood spread out along with a bloody mist. The Yu clan's relatives and servants had never seen murder like this. Those who were braver had only seen beheadings at the entrance of the food market. They couldn't bear to watch any longer and turned their heads away to retch. Chapter 143. The cold light receded and the blood mist gradually dissipated. The 3 bandits had turned into a pool of blood on the ground. Looking at Yu Qianzhou, who was standing with his hands behind his back, everyone shuddered. This was clearly a murderous demon. The thick smell of blood left a deep mark in everyone's heart. "Fu Qing," Yu Qianzhou called out. The person who was called let out an "ah," and moved over with trembling legs. His chin trembled as he said, Eldest young master." Yu Qianzhou glanced at him and frowned. He shouted, "What are you afraid of? How can you guard the door of my Yu clan with this kind of behavior? Stand properly." Yes, eldest young master." Fu Qing tried his best to suppress his trembling body. "Arrange for people to surround this place. Without my permission, none of the Yu clan's relatives are allowed to leave." As he spoke, a sword appeared in Yu Qianzhou's hand and he handed it to him. He said, "Hold this well. If anyone dares to barge in, kill them with this sword." Seeing him holding the sword in a daze, Yu Qianzhou shouted again, "If anyone dares to barge in, kill them without mercy. If you dare to let even one person go, I will take your head. Do you understand?" Understood. Fu Qing hurriedly nodded his head. All the relatives looked at each other in dismay, but no one dared to object. The patriarch and his sons' faces were ashen. Yu Qianzhou faced his father and bowed. He said, "Father, please wait a moment. I will go to the Octagon village to bring my brother back. It won't be long before the truth is revealed." Yu Qianhui nodded and said, "Go. Come back quickly. Don't let the relatives wait too long." "Yes, father." Yu Qianzhou bowed respectfully. The long sword behind him shot out with a chong sound and carried him away like a ray of light. Instantly, everyone in the courtyard was dumbfounded. That leisurely flying celestial being was fortunately seen by a group of ordinary people. Someone immediately exclaimed, "Heavens! Big brother is a sword immortal." "Ah, sword immortal." All the relatives whispered to each other. Yu Qianhui was so excited that he was trembling slightly. He had told his son to go and come back quickly, but he didn't expect that he would use such a shocking method. Did he say something wrong? Why did he say go and return quickly? One must know that a sword immortal would never show his true appearance in front of mortals. My son is no longer an ordinary person. I was too abrupt. Fu Qing looked at the sword in his hand with a face full of surprise. Today he was fortunate enough to be bestowed a sword by a sword immortal. This was a blessing that he had cultivated for 8 lifetimes. He held the sword with both hands and walked over to Yu Zhanggui. He asked respectfully, "Master, what should this lowly one do?" Yu Zhanggui stared at the sword in his hand and couldn't help but reach out to take it. He turned it over and over in his hand and examined it, causing the other clan members to look at it with envy. Yu Zhanggui stood up from his chair and pulled out the sword. The sword was blue like autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp blade glowed with envy. Yu Zhanggui stood up from his chair and pulled out his sword with a schwa sound. The blade of the sword was as clear as autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp edge of the sword was glowing. "Good sword. It's really a good sword." All the relatives kept praising it. In fact, they couldn't tell if it was a good sword or not. They mainly thought that it was something from a sword immortal. How could it be bad? In addition, the sword looked so beautiful, so they naturally concluded that it was a good sword. This sword was personally refined by Yu Qianzhou, and there were many more in Utopia. As he could only control 100 flying swords, these were all in stock. However, compared to the treasured swords of the mortal world, this flying sword of the Dharma artifact level was incomparable in terms of workmanship and material. Yu Zhanggui put the sword back into its scabbard and handed it to Fu Qing. This isn't an ordinary sword. It's the eldest young master's flying sword. Since the eldest young master has already given you the authority, just do as he says. You can mobilize all the servants in the residence. Go. The moment he said this, all the servants looked at Fu Qing with envy. Some of the unmarried maids looked at Fu Qing with splendor in their eyes. Yes. Fu Qing retreated. He never thought that a servant guarding the door would have such great authority. This thing was not inferior to an imperial sword. Thinking of the eldest young master's words, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly mobilized people and surrounded all the relatives. Yu Qianzhou still had some impression of the Octagon village's location. After leaving the Yu residence, it only took him a few moments to find the Octagon village's hideout in a mountainous area that was 100 miles away. He landed on the sword and immediately caused a commotion in the hideout. Yu Qianzhou sized up the village. It was built on the basis of danger. It was indeed a good place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It was no wonder that even the authorities couldn't take it down. He squinted his eyes and stared at the signboard at the main entrance of the stronghold. On it were the words Ji Hall. He snorted in his heart. It seemed like robbers liked to use this gimmick. At this moment, a group of people came out of the hall. All of them were holding shining swords and spears. Needless to say, the burly man in the middle was the leader of the bandit hideout. The man was stunned when he saw Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou was also stunned when he saw him. The burly man was wearing the same clothes as him. It was the standard clothes of the supporting Immortal Island. After a closer look, he was astonishingly at the 10th level of the Qi refinement realm. The man excitedly strode over and kowtowed. He said, "Luli greets Senior. Senior has come here, but the sect wants..." He was so excited that he couldn't continue speaking. The group of bandits behind him were also dumbfounded. Yu Qianzhou was stunned again. He immediately understood everything. So this guy was also an unlucky person who was chased out of the supporting Immortal Island. No wonder the second leader knew a little about the cultivation world. Looking at this guy's expression, he probably thought that the supporting Immortal Island wanted to call him back. Wishful thinking. I was wondering who was causing trouble here. So it was the abandoned disciple of the supporting Immortal Island. You actually dared to wear the clothes of the supporting Immortal Island. You really don't want to live. Yu Qianzhou snorted. The man kowtowed again. Senior, please forgive me. After I left the supporting Immortal Island, I really didn't know how to survive. I could only bring a group of people to become bandits. Yu Qianzhou thought about it. A disciple who wasn't even at the foundation establishment stage couldn't even be compared to a martial arts expert. Moreover, most of them had lost contact with the outside world since they were young. They knew nothing about survival. Ling Feng and the others were also at a loss when they were just chased out. Like Guan Yu, he ended up pretending to be a Taoist in a Taoist temple to swindle people. Thinking about this, his anger dissipated a lot. He said in a deep voice, "You are Luli, right? Get up. I'm not here to catch up with you. Where is the kidnapped kid in the Yu residence?" Luli quickly got up and pointed to the horse pen. "That kid is locked up there. You didn't do anything to him, right?" Yu Qianzhou glanced at him coldly. No, not even a strand of hair is missing." Luli wasn't an idiot. He could tell that this kid was related to the people from the supporting Immortal Island. In his heart, he cursed the employer's ancestors, but he didn't know that he was also cursing Yu Qianzhou's ancestors. Yu Qianzhou slowly walked into the horse pen. Instantly, a rage burned in his chest. A kid whose face could be vaguely seen was about 8 or 9 years old. He was glaring at the people who came in. His body was covered with grass and horse dung. He was tied up tightly and his mouth was stuffed with a dirty cloth. His cheeks were swollen and there was a clear palm print. It was obvious that he had been slapped. This was his younger brother, Yu Wuxiao? This is what you meant by not even a strand of hair is missing. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Luli with a cold smile. He originally wanted to take him in for his own use. But now he was sentenced to death on the spot. The latter was so scared that his head was full of sweat. He stuttered and didn't know what to say. Yu Qianzhou walked to the kid's side and pulled out the rag in his mouth. A trail of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Who knew that the kid would spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva the moment he loosened his mouth? He opened his mouth and cursed, "Evil thieves, kill me if you have the guts. Otherwise, I will trample your den to the ground in the future." Yu Qianzhou, who was spat on his face, was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly and wiped his face. This brat spoke without rhyme or reason. He didn't know how to beat around the bush. If he was really a bandit, seeing him like this, I'm afraid he would really eliminate the root of the problem to prevent future troubles. He immediately flicked his finger on the kid's forehead and scolded jokingly, "Brat, what are you spitting for?" "I'm Yu Qianqiu." "Bastard, how dare you flick my forehead? You're Yu Qianqiu, right? Okay, I'll remember you." "You're Yu Qianqiu? Why is your name the same as my big brother's?" The kid's tattered face was crooked. "Nonsense, I'm your big brother. Father sent me to save you," Yu Qianqiu said unhappily. Chapter 144. There's no proof. The kid showed a suspicious expression. "What proof do you have to prove that you are my brother?" "Bastard, you're so smart. If you were smart, how could you be tied up here?" Yu Qianqiu flicked him again, causing him to cry out in pain. He casually broke the ropes binding him, got up, stared at Lu Li and asked, "This was caused by Yu Zhangping's family and you, right? How did you know? Could it be that the second-in-command who went down the mountain told you?" Lu Li was shocked. Only he and the second head knew about this. He didn't tell anyone else. It was the second head who told him. It wasn't a good thing to betray one's employer. Yu Qianqiu sneered. With Yu Zhangping's character, he shows everything on his face. Do you need someone to tell you? As for your second head, I saw that he wasn't feeling well, so I sent him to reincarnate. It's him. Suddenly, the kid pointed at his swollen face and said, "It was Yu Zhangping, that bastard. He tricked us out of the city. My face is swollen because of him." "You killed the second head. Then there are two other brothers?" Lu Li was shocked. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the child and didn't say anything. He turned back to size up Lu Li and asked curiously, "I say, Lu Li, have you been away from supporting Immortal Island for too long, or have water entered your brain? Do I need to report to you when I kill people? Stop talking nonsense with me. If it wasn't for the fact that we were from the same sect, your head would have been removed. Go and gather all your minions. I have something to say." Lu Li seemed to be drained of all his strength. He said dejectedly, "Yes," and walked out slowly. Maybe because he was tied up for too long, Yu Wuqiu's limbs were a little stiff. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. "Can you still walk? Do you want me to carry you?" Yu Wuqiu was embarrassed into anger. "Who wants you to carry me? I can walk by myself." He suddenly asked curiously, "Are you really my brother?" He kept looking at the stranger in front of him. "Follow me if you can." Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He thought to himself, "You're just a little kid, yet you're already so arrogant. This is the problem of spoiling the children of big families. If this goes on, you'll be at a disadvantage. Today I'll teach this cheap little brother a lesson, lest he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Dang dang dang. The urgent sound of a gong rang outside, and the entire stronghold became lively. Lu Li stood on a small wooden platform and looked at the hundreds of subordinates that had gathered. His face was ashen and he did not make a sound, as if he had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. However, Yu Qianqiu's strength was not something he could fight against. To put it bluntly, killing him was as easy as killing an ant. A group of subordinates stood in an orderly manner below the platform. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. They were quite disciplined. He looked back at the little kid who was limping behind him and said, "Follow me." Lu Li took the lead and walked to the side of the wooden platform. The little kid struggled to climb up, but before he could stand firm, Yu Qianqiu grabbed the back of his collar and lifted him up. "Let go of me, I can walk." The little kid's struggle was futile. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the group of people below and said, "Originally, I wanted to let them go today, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish today." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Li knelt down and begged, "Senior, please let them go. They have parents and children at the foot of the mountain. Their families depend on them to earn money. If they weren't forced to, they wouldn't have followed me up the mountain to become bandits. Once they're killed, their families won't be able to survive. Senior, please have mercy." The subordinates all looked terrified. They had all seen Yu Qianqiu descend from the sky. To them, those who could fly in the sky were like gods. Now that this god said he wanted to kill them, they immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. In an instant, the entire mountain camp was filled with begging voices. "What do you mean by taking care of the elderly and children? After you die, tell those words to the people you killed. Since you've come out to make a living, you must understand that sooner or later, you'll have to pay for what you did. It's not that I won't pay, it's that the time isn't right." Yu Qianqiu slowly said in a cold voice, "No. Senior, I beg you, no." Lu Li hugged his leg and begged. "Scram." Yu Qianqiu directly kicked him off the platform. Then he shook the little kid and shouted, "Watch carefully." In fact, Yu Wuqiu was already a little stunned. He had never seen so many people kneeling and begging. As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold lights shot out from the storage bag, crazily sweeping towards the people kneeling on the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and screams shook the sky. The little kid was stunned at first. When he came to his senses, his whole body trembled. He covered his eyes with his little hands, unable to watch any more. Xianxia coldly snorted. Today he was going to kill this person for you to see. You have no choice but to watch. His thumb and index finger pinched the back of the little kid's neck, and a stream of true essence entered his body. The little kid's hands immediately drooped down, and his eyes were wide open. Witnessing the bloody, violent, and wanton killing in front of him, he could not speak, nor could he close his eyes. He could not move and could only watch and listen. Crystal clear tears continuously flowed down his cheeks. Below the platform, Lu Li clenched his fists and knelt there with tears streaming down his face. He looked up to the sky and howled. But none of those wantonly killing flying swords touched him. Those who wanted to escape were immediately shredded into pieces by a few cold lights. There were also those who wanted to fight it out with Xianxia before they died. Unfortunately, they did not even have the chance to get close. Their legs were nowhere to be seen, and when they fell, they were already shredded into pieces. In just a short while, apart from Lu Li, not a single living person could be seen below. Broken limbs were everywhere, and the blood on the ground gathered into streams that flowed towards the lower ground. The smell of blood in the air was suffocating. After killing those who needed to be killed, Xianxia's divine sense moved, and 100 cold lights swept towards the various buildings in the village with an unstoppable momentum. Crashing sounds could be heard everywhere. Not long after, smoke and dust rose everywhere. Even the erected flagpole was not spared. The cold lights retracted and the sounds disappeared. The surroundings finally quieted down, and only Lu Li's sobbing could be heard below the platform. The entire octagon village was no longer recognizable. Only the wooden platform under Xianxia's feet remained the same, standing there alone. Xianxia turned the little lad's head around and let him look around. He said, "Didn't you want to flatten this place? I've already done it for you, but what's wrong with you? Why don't you even dare to look? If you don't even dare to look, what gives you the right to say that you want to flatten this place?" Xianxia lifted him up and faced him, shouting, "Crying? Why are you crying? You only have this little guts and this little bit of guts. Are you even worthy of saying such things?" As he spoke, he turned him around again, letting him witness the tragic scene around him. He spun around and shouted, "Do you see that? Originally, I did not intend to kill them, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. Alright, it's flattened now. Why are you crying? Are you regretting it? Then why did you open your mouth and speak such nonsense? Let me tell you now, as a man, you must be responsible for every word you say. Everything in front of you is the result of your careless words. Look carefully at everything here." After a while, when he was almost done lecturing Lu Li, Xianxia bent over and picked up Lu Li. Then he carried the two of them and flew away on his sword. Just as he stood up, the wooden platform collapsed. The entire octagon village was completely flattened. Chapter 145. Inside the Yu clan's courtyard, Xianxia descended from the sky with two people in his hands, his long sword returning to its scabbard. Everyone was shocked when they saw Yu Wuqiao's appearance. They didn't expect the Yu clan's young master, who usually lived a luxurious life, to end up like this, especially with the two palm prints on his face. When the patriarch and his son saw the people brought by Xianxia, their faces turned deathly pale. Xianhuan waved his hand to disperse the crowd, then hurriedly walked up to his son, who had a lifeless expression on his face, and asked anxiously, "Wuqiao, what happened to you?" "Father, he's fine. He was just a little frightened," Xianxia said calmly. At this moment, Yu Wuqiao was awoken by his father's familiar face. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Xianxia was like he had seen a ghost. He hurriedly hid behind Xianhuan, hugged his arm and pointed at Xianxia, screaming, "Father, he killed people. He really killed people. He killed so many people. So many people died." Everyone looked at Xianxia at the same time, but they clearly weren't surprised that he had killed people. Xianhuan looked at his eldest son, puzzled, and asked, "What happened?" "It's nothing. It's just a few hundred small fries from the Octagon camp. I casually took care of them. In the future there won't be any more Octagon camp bandits in this area," Xianxia said with a calm smile. He said it lightly, but everyone's hair stood on end. A few hundred people were all killed by him in less than 4 hours? The more they thought about it, the colder they felt. When did the Yu clan have such a killer? You killed them all? Yu Chang'e frowned. Obviously he was a little unhappy with his son's massacre. I didn't kill them all. I left one alive. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and pointed at the man lying on the ground. He sneered and said, "This is the Octagon Stronghold's big leader, Lu Li. He has a close relationship with our patriarch and his son. I've already asked him and he's already explained everything. This time, the kidnapping of my younger brother was the doing of the sanctimonious patriarch of our Yu clan, father and son. Their goal was to steal our clan's wealth. They were going to kill the hostages as soon as they got the gold, and then think of a way to get rid of my father so that there would be no successor for our family, and then find a reason to swallow our property." The 2 handprints on his younger brother's face were personally slapped by Yu Zhangping after he tricked him out of the city. It's just that they never expected me to come back at this time. The Yu clan's relatives immediately went into an uproar. They instantly distanced themselves from the father and son. It would be best if they didn't get hurt by this killer. Yu Qianzhou sneered in his heart. Just by looking at the father and son's expression, he knew that this wasn't something that his son could do alone. This daddy doesn't have time to be long-winded with you. I'll first make up a crime for you. In any case, it's just that. If I didn't care about this old man's face, I would have killed you long ago. Yu Chang'e's complexion turned ashen. He fiercely turned his head and glared at the father and son. He shouted, "Unsatisfied beasts, what else do you 2 dogs have to say?" When the patriarch and his son saw Yu Qianzhou bring Lu Li and Yu Wuqiao here, they knew that everything was over. They originally wanted to quibble, but when they saw the gloomy expression in Yu Qianzhou's eyes, they couldn't say anything. In the face of such a powerful opponent, any kind of explanation was unnecessary. Suddenly Yu Changping rushed out of the crowd and knelt in front of Yu Chang'e's feet. He repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Big brother, I was blinded by greed. Big brother, for the sake of being from the same clan, please spare me this time." As he spoke, he slapped his own mouth. Yu Chang'e kicked him away and sternly shouted, "Bastard, I don't have a brother like you. Come, tie up this father and son pair and send them to the government office together with this bandit." Several able-bodied men immediately took ropes and tied up the 3 men tightly, and then they were pushed out of the room. The Yu clan's relatives shook their heads and sighed. They didn't expect this sanctimonious father and son pair to have such wild ambitions. How many people didn't covet this family's wealth? Wait. Yu Chang'e suddenly sighed and said, "Forget it, family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Just send them to the ancestral hall and deal with them according to the clan's rules." Then he cupped his hands towards the other clan members and said, "I hope that when we carry out the clan's rules, the clan members can be witnesses." That's right. Family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Of course. Don't worry, big brother. We all saw it with our own eyes, so we must be witnesses. Everyone agreed. Yu Chang'e was the clan's biggest financial backer. If they didn't do him a favor, then when would they do him a favor? In any case, they wouldn't lose anything. At this time, Yu Qianzhou suddenly stood up with a smile and bowed to everyone, saying, "Junior also has a matter to ask of all the uncles and brothers. Junior came back this time because of my father's summons. Since this matter is over, Junior still needs to go out and cultivate. As for this matter, I hope that all the uncles and brothers can keep it a secret for Junior. Just pretend that Junior never appeared in this matter, please." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone immediately agreed, but the atmosphere from before was gone. Although they were all clan members, the crux of the matter was that this fellow was too ruthless. Killing people was like cutting vegetables, and he didn't even blink. Who knew what the consequences would be if they said the wrong thing? But from his words, everyone thought of one thing. It turned out that there was such a powerful son hiding behind Yu Chang'e, and he could summon him at any time, but he had never said anything about it. How sinister. Fortunately, they hadn't offended him too much. Otherwise, if something happened, it would be a massacre. Who could resist that? Everyone shuddered at the thought of it. Yu Qianzhou smiled and thanked them. This was the effect he wanted. It wasn't easy for him to come back, so he had no choice but to use such a ruthless method. Since they had met, he had to get rid of them completely. In the future, he wouldn't place his thoughts here. A group of clan members and servants escorted the 3 people out of the Yu residence. The surroundings instantly became much quieter. Yu Wuqiao hid behind his father, craning his neck to secretly size up this elder brother of his. This elder brother was really a little too scary. Yu Qianzhou smiled at him. He had thought that Yu Wuqiao had been frightened, and he had to adjust his emotions a little to prevent it from leaving a shadow in his heart. Now it seemed that this brat was born with courage and there was no need to worry. What you said just now was all true? Yu Changwei looked at him and frowned. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and he asked in surprise, what was true? You said that you still had to go out to cultivate. Didn't you come back with success this time? Yu Changwei asked. Yu Wuqiu, who was behind him, suddenly shook him and asked, Father, is he really my elder brother, Yu Qianqiu? Yu Changwei lowered his head and shouted, Bastard, if he isn't your elder brother, who else could he be? Yu Wuqiu pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said embarrassedly, but he killed a lot of people. Father, he really killed a lot of people. Hundreds of people were all killed by him. Ignorant. Yu Changwei shouted, if your elder brother didn't want to save you, would he have killed so many people? When he remembered that the Octagon village had kidnapped both of his sons, he felt a wave of disgust in his heart. He thought that it was good to kill them. If they didn't kill them, who knew when they would kidnap his grandson again? Yu Qianqiu smiled and suddenly reached out to Fu Qin, who was standing not far away. The sword that Fu Qin was holding flew into his hand, causing the latter to panic. Yu Qianqiu handed the sword to his brother and said with a smile, Take it. Chapter 146. When Yu Wuqiu saw that the sword could fly by itself, his eyes were already full of stars. When he saw his big brother telling him to hold it, he greedily looked at it and looked up at his father. Seeing his father nod his head, he shyly reached out to take it and held it tightly in his arms. He looked at his big brother and finally had a good impression of him. He still had the mind of a child. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, Wuqiu, can you write now? Yu Wuqiu nodded his head and said, I could write when I was 4. Not bad. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and shouted to Fucking, bring a short table over and prepare a brush, ink and paper. Fucking hurriedly went to prepare. Yu Changwei looked at his 2 sons and didn't know what they were going to do. After a while all the tools were set up. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the table and smiled at his brother. Wuqiu, big brother has something to say to you. I will speak and you write. Write down everything I say. I want to test if you can really write. Hearing him say this, Yu Wuqiu's childish eagerness to win was aroused. He walked over and put the sword on the table. He grabbed the writing brush and dipped it in the ink. He stared at his brother with big eyes, waiting for him to speak. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and walked over to his side and said with a smile, I am the eldest son of the family. I should be filial to my parents and share my father's worries. But I am young and frivolous. I want to pursue the great way, but the great way is vague. This road is full of ups and downs, but I must pursue it. I dare not be distracted and I am ashamed to face my parents. Today I will take up the brush and entrust a heavy task to me. At this point, Yu Wuqiu knew what he meant and looked back at his big brother in shock. Yu Changwei's eyebrows knitted together. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips and signaled his brother to continue writing. He sighed and said, From today onwards, big brother's heavy responsibility will be entrusted to me. Brother must remember that when we were in the bandits' lair, big brother used the blood of hundreds of bandits to teach you. You must know that only by enduring the hardships of hardships can one rise above others. One must not indulge in riches and honor, one must guard against arrogance and rashness, one must be filial to one's parents, one must inherit the family business, and one must carry forward the family's name. Brother, I hope you will remember this great trust. After he finished speaking, he also finished writing. Although his handwriting wasn't very good, the meaning of the words was simple and clear. Yu Wuqiu was still a little confused about the great Tao in front of him. He only knew that his brother was going out to do something big, and everything in the family was going to be entrusted to him. Looking at the words on the paper, he pouted for a long time before reluctantly saying, I will remember big brother's words. It's good that you've remembered it. Keep what you've written well. If I come back one day and find that you've failed to do it, you're still acting like a thief in a den of thieves. You don't have any real ability, but you're still spouting nonsense. Just wait and see how I'll deal with you then. Yu Qianqiu laughed. Yu Wuqiu pouted higher and higher. Yu Changwei, on the other hand, was distressed. Originally, when he saw that his eldest son had returned, he thought that someone was going to inherit the family business. The tradition of the Wuxia Empire was that the eldest son would inherit the family business. Now that the eldest son had borrowed his second son's pen to express his intentions clearly, it was equivalent to indirectly answering the previous question. The path that he had walked on must be incomparably difficult, and he was afraid that it would be difficult to turn back. That's why he did this. He had put in a lot of effort. Yu Changwei couldn't say anything more. Now that his son's real situation was in front of him, he was no longer an ordinary person and couldn't force him to stay. He could only regret why he agreed to his son's request back then. He sighed and said, Fu Qing, put up the second young master's calligraphy and hang it in his room. Yes. Fu Qing respectfully accepted the order. Speaking of which, Fu Qing was really happy today. Master and young master would always look for him whenever something happened. His future was probably going to change. When are we leaving? Yu Changrui sighed. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He originally wanted to leave right away, but thinking that it was too much. He hadn't returned for almost 10 years, what's the matter if he delayed for a day? He smiled and replied, then let's stay one more night. Yu Changrui understood the meaning behind his words. He waved his hand and called for the servants to prepare a banquet. The father and son trio walked toward xuanhuan. Yu Wuqiu hugged the sword happily. Just as he reached the door, he saw xuanhuan coming out. When the latter saw her youngest son, she immediately hugged him and burst into tears. Yu Qianqiu had a toothache when he heard this. They hadn't seen each other for almost 10 years, but his mother still loved to cry. Both he and his father turned their heads to the side. How did my son become like this? Who slapped him on his face? Xuanhuan asked anxiously. Yu Changgui's face twitched. He turned his head and said, I say, are you done yet? Such a small injury will be fine in 2 days. Can't you see boss is here? Why are you crying all the time? Xuanhuan stood up. When she saw Yu Qianqiu, she threw herself at him and cried, where did my son go for so many years? Don't tell me you don't even want your mother anymore. Woo. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and pushed her away. He smiled bitterly, Mother, your son hasn't eaten for a long time. My stomach is really hungry. Then why didn't you say so earlier? Xuanhuan wiped away her tears and said, you wait, I will personally get it for you. She then led the servant girl away. Phew. The father and son let out a breath and looked at each other. Xiao Wuqiu shook his head and sighed, I really can't stand mother like this. I would rather stay in the thieves' den for a few more days. Bastard, what did you say? Yu Changrui shouted. The little fellow stuck out his tongue and quickly changed the topic. Big brother, I am too dirty. I will go take a bath first. Otherwise, I won't be able to attend the banquet later. He then ran away. Soon, the family of 4 sat at the sumptuous dinner table. With his mother's persuasion, Yu Qianqiu ate until he was full. Although it was a little uncomfortable, he enjoyed the warm feeling. That night, in Yu Changgui's study room, the father and son had a deep conversation. Yu Qianqiu gave them 3 sealed porcelain bottles as an explanation. After that, Yu Qianqiu asked someone to invite his mother over. In front of the 2 elders, he took out 2 ruby elixirs that were shining with rainbow light and handed them to them. The couple looked at the beads in their hands with their mouths agape. After a long time, Yu Changrui was moved and said, is this an immortal elixir? Yu Qianqiu smiled indifferently and said, more or less. Father, mother, just take it. This elixir has the effect of preserving one's appearance for a long time. It can also detoxify and nourish one's appearance. After taking it, one will be immune to all kinds of poison. However, there are some side effects after taking it. You have to be prepared beside the toilet bowl and bathtub. Hearing the benefits, the couple directly filtered out the side effects. Yu Changrui solemnly swallowed the rainbow light into his mouth. However, he was not used to this quail egg-sized thing, so it took a lot of effort to swallow it down his throat. Xuanhuan was about to swallow it, but she stopped and said, I think I don't need it. Leave it for your brother. Have you used it before, my son? Yu Qianqiu sighed in his heart. All mothers in the world were great. He smiled and said, my brother is still young. Do you want him to stay like this for the rest of his life? I will take care of his matters. Mother, you don't have to worry too much. As for the elixir, I have already used it. You can take it with ease. Only then did Xuanhuan feel at ease and swallow it. After coming out, he did not sleep in his original room that night. Instead, he slept with his brother. He told the boy many things, but he did not know if he could remember them. The next morning, the family could no longer find him. Only then did they realize that Yu Qianqiu had left quietly. Yu Changrui stood in the garden with his son, who was holding a sword. The former let out a long sigh. Chapter 147. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to spend the night peacefully before leaving. After lying in bed with his brother and chatting for a while, the little fellow fell asleep in a daze, perhaps because he was too tired. Looking at the sleeping little fellow, Yu Qianqiu felt emotional. He considered if he should help the little fellow to a position that ordinary people couldn't reach. After some thought, he gave up. This family didn't have many people to begin with and he was leaving. Furthermore, no one knew what the future held for them. Sometimes there were some things that he wasn't confident in. If he wasn't careful, he might bring disaster to the family. It was best to let the family live peacefully. He tried his best not to let them get involved in those illusory matters. He could do whatever he wanted alone. Having a family to feed them would only be a burden to both of them. It was too dangerous. Unable to sleep late at night, Xianxia decided to leave when he thought of how his mother would definitely be crying when they parted the next day. Although he said that he was leaving, he had actually returned to Utopia in an instant. Now, any place was extremely close to him, but it was also extremely far away. It was also late at night in Utopia. However, Ethereal Palace on Ethereal Peak was like a starry sky. It was extremely charming under the embellishment of fluorite. The messy names of Ethereal Peak and Ethereal Palace were all given by Xianxia. The main reason was that he couldn't think of any good names, so he used them as if he had heard them somewhere before. As soon as Xianxia appeared in Misty Palace, he heard a familiar horn sound from afar. He turned his head to look and murmured, "Emergency assembly signal. Is Yunshang training for night raids again? Let's take a look." There was a field in the middle of a row of wooden and stone houses that took up an area of nearly 1,000 meters. At that moment, the field was surrounded by flames. A group of people rushed out of the houses and lined up neatly in 3 groups. Xianxia quietly appeared on top of a building to observe. The people in front of him were the original 400 disciples from the various sections. After eliminating the female disciples, there were 309 people left. Thus, under Xianxia's suggestion, Guanyu divided them into 3 companies. Each company had 103 people with a company commander. Each company was further divided into 3 platoons, each platoon consisting of 34 people. Each platoon had a platoon leader. Each platoon was divided into 3 classes, and each class had 11 people. Each class had a squad leader. The 3 company commanders were 3 late nascent soul cultivators, and the platoon leaders and squad leaders were also nascent soul cultivators. At the same cultivation level, these positions were usually taken by cultivators who were good at commanding. Guanyu immediately discovered that the efficiency of training had greatly increased after the division management. In front of the field, a large black triangular flag was hung on a flagpole. If one were to look at it carefully under the light of the flames, they could vaguely see 2 large golden characters embroidered on it. Hero. Next to the flagpole, on a stone platform, Guanyu was dressed in black with a black scarf wrapped around his head. He swept his cold gaze across the field with an extraordinary bearing, nodding his head in satisfaction. Suddenly, he shouted in a deep voice, "Company Commander, come up to the stage to receive the battle plan." He then took out 3 jade archives. The 3 men standing in front of the 3 teams rushed up to the stone platform. They each received a jade archive from Guanyu and immediately scanned it with their divine sense. Once they were done, they returned the jade archives and dashed to the front of their respective teams. The 3 of them shouted to the members of their respective teams, "Dress according to the requirements of battle plan number 3. Carry the appropriate weapons. You are required to assemble within 5 minutes. Dismissed." Whoosh. In an instant, all 3 teams rushed back to their rooms. Not long after, one by one, they rushed out dressed in black with black scarves wrapped around their heads. After they were in position, the company commanders gathered their platoon commanders and squad leaders and quickly passed down the battle plan. Finally, one by one, the company commanders reported to Guanyu, "Reporting. First company is ready. Reporting. Second company is ready. Reporting. Third company is ready." Guanyu nodded and shouted, "Order." Once the target has entered the encirclement, the first round of attack will be concentrated by all 3 companies. We must inflict the greatest amount of damage to the target. Once we achieve the desired effect, immediately move on to the second round of attack. First company and third company will be the main attackers, while second company will support them. Also, seize the spoils of war as fast as possible. Considering that the target may have a large number of reinforcements, once this situation is discovered, third company will immediately switch from the main attack to a defensive position. If the defensive position is not ideal, first company and second company will quickly return to support. Gather the greatest fighting strength possible and retreat quickly. If the situation becomes extremely dire, first company and second company will retreat, while third company will cover the rear. Understood? Understood. The shouts shook the heavens. With a wave of Guanyu's hand, the company commanders turned around and shouted, "Move out!" With the order, over 300 people pulled the black scarves from their necks to their noses, revealing only their eyes. They quickly flew into the sky, with Xuanhu following closely behind. In an instant, the entire field became quiet, with only the flickering of fire. Standing on the roof, Xianxia shook his head and sighed, "Not bad." From the time of the emergency assembly to the time of departure, it took less than 10 minutes. But their weapons are different and their cultivation methods are also different. I wonder if they can unleash the greatest power in a group battle. Looks like I'll have to find an opportunity to drag them out and test it out. Currently, Xianxia was the only one living in the small courtyard, and it was very quiet. Yang Qian was also very perceptive. When he saw that the direct disciple of the Alchemy Pavilion's managing elder and the daughter of the 10,000 Fragrance Gardens managing elder were together, he no longer assigned anyone to this courtyard. After the death of the Alchemy Pavilion's external deacon, Yan Shu, Guan Weiwu had not found anyone to replace him. For the time being, the internal deacon Yang Qian was in charge of all these miscellaneous matters. He had practically become the Alchemy Pavilion's chief steward and had a lot of power. Xianxia leisurely walked towards the main hall of the Alchemy Pavilion. Many disciples would call him martial uncle when they saw him, and those of the same generation would greet each other. Those of a higher generation would also nod at him. As for the fact that his cultivation had already reached the core formation stage, he did not tell anyone on Fuxian Island. All in all, these days were quite comfortable. Thinking back to what Gu Qingyun had said when he saw his carefree life, he said, "You're the best. For someone of my cultivation in a place like the Cultivation Pavilion, where experts are as common as clouds, it would be tiring to just greet and greet. It would be best for me to obediently hide and cultivate and not come out." "Do you know where Deacon Yang is?" Xianxia pulled a disciple over and asked. He had come to find Yang Qian. After the disciple greeted him, he told him that Yang Qian was in the main hall. When he walked into the main hall, he saw Yang Qian looking around. "Deacon Yang," Xianxia shouted. Yang Qian turned around and saw that it was him. He shook his head and said with a smile, "It's really difficult to see you even once. Tell me, why did you take the initiative to find me this time?" "Look at what you're saying. Aren't you too busy right now? I don't want to disturb you so often," Xianxia joked. The two of them had always had a good relationship and would often joke around like this when they met. "I still have things to do. If you have something to say, just say it," Yang Qian said bluntly. Xianxia nodded and asked, "I heard that all the sects are going to send more people to the Cultivation Alliance. Is this true?" "You still don't know if it's true or not. Didn't the person in Wanfan Garden tell you?" Yang Qian smiled meaningfully. "I only heard about this. I don't know the specifics. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to disturb you." "Oh." Yang Qian smiled noncommittally. He paused and said, "It's true. The cause is the matter between Ong Kwang-tsung and the Demon Blood Palace. Both sides have stopped fighting, but this time, many sects were involved. Regarding Ong Kwang-tsung always stirring up trouble, all the righteous sects in the cultivation world are very angry. Therefore they decided to strengthen the Cultivation Alliance in name only. It will truly play a role of fair adjudication. Those sects that cause trouble will be punished together. Right now, all the sects are discussing the specifics. I reckon that in a few days they will send people to put it into action." Xianxia nodded in thought. "So it was like this." He understood. Yang Qian looked at him and said strangely, "Why do you ask? Do you want to go? I advise you not to think about it. This kind of thing is usually led by the people of the Cultivation Pavilion. It has nothing to do with the people of the other sections." Chapter 148. What kind of logic is this? Xianxia frowned. Everyone is a disciple of Fuxian Island. Why is the Cultivation Pavilion in charge of this matter? Isn't the sect being a little too biased by doing this? His voice grew louder as he spoke. He wasn't excited, but he really wanted this chance to leave the island. With the name of Fuxian Island, Ong Kwang-tsung believed that everything would go smoothly. So what if the other party recognized that this Xianxia was the Xianxia? As long as he could see Chu Ping fulfill his promise, he would just deny it. He didn't believe that Ong Kwang-tsung would dare to detain a disciple of Fuxian Island. Even if he took a step back, could they detain him? As for what kind of trouble he would cause, that was a matter for the future. He had been away from Chu Ping for too long. On the surface, he looked like he was living comfortably, but who knew that there was a thorn in his throat? He couldn't eat or sleep well. He wanted to go according to his plan, but the time was too torturous. Who knew how long he would have to wait? Lower your voice. How dare you speak so carelessly? Yang Qian dragged him to a remote place outside the hall. He was slightly annoyed. Who said that the sect is biased? The disciples that are sent out represent the face of supporting Immortal Island. They might encounter unexpected situations at any time. That's why the cultivation pavilion has to choose the most elite disciples of the same cultivation level. How can you say that the sect is biased? Don't the other branches have elite disciples? Why do we have to choose from the cultivation pavilion? Yu Qianqiu was a little restless, so his words were a little direct. Yang Qian was indeed a little angry. A foundation establishment disciple actually dared to speak to him in such a tone. Then he thought of the two principal elders standing behind him and calmed himself down. Then he said earnestly, "You've been on supporting Immortal Island for a long time. You have to know your priorities. What is the master?" The cultivation pavilion was the foundation of the entire supporting Immortal Island. Every generation's sect master was a principal elder of the cultivation pavilion, so the cultivation pavilion was the master. The existence of the other branches is to cooperate with the cultivation pavilion. This is the first time. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu's face was still dark, he explained again, "This trip to the Cultivation Alliance isn't like usual. We'll have to work with other sects for a long time. To put it bluntly, the people who go out are related to the reputation of Fuxian Island, the #1 sect in the world. Those who can go are the elite disciples of various cultivation periods." The sect has already decided that in addition to appointing a pavilion of cultivation elder as the person in charge, 3 days from now, there will be a selection competition at the Pavilion of Cultivation to select 5 nascent soul disciples and 10 core formation disciples. Foundation establishment disciples will not be included. His last sentence was undoubtedly telling Yu Qianqiu, "You're still in the foundation establishment stage, don't count on it." Yu Qianqiu furrowed his brows and asked, "What kind of screening method? Did the sect stipulate that only disciples of the Pavilion of Cultivation can participate?" "No, as long as you're in the nascent soul or core formation stage you can participate. The nascent soul disciples will be in the top 5, and the core formation disciples will be in the top 10. However, according to convention, the other branches won't participate. In fact, they don't have to participate. You can imagine the result. On one side are disciples who have no time to cultivate, and on the other side are disciples who put all their energy into cultivation. Among the disciples of the same level, how many can be a match for the Pavilion of Cultivation?" Yu Qianqiu happily said, "Deacon Yang, if I want to participate, where do I go to sign up?" Seeing that this guy still didn't give up, Yang Qian said with a slightly unhappy expression, "What? Did you just ignore what I just said? Didn't you hear me say that foundation establishment disciples can't participate?" "Who said I'm a foundation establishment disciple?" said Yu Qianqiu with a smile. He stretched out a palm and a plume of smoke rose up from his palm. In an instant, 3 Bingdi lotuses were condensed, swaying in the wind in a lifelike manner. 2 of the lotuses were in full bloom. The other one was still a bud and hadn't bloomed yet, but it clearly told the other party that his cultivation had reached the early stage of core formation. Early stage of core formation. Yang Qian was dumbstruck. If he remembered correctly, when Yu Qianqiu first came to Fuxian Island, he was only at the 10th level of qi refining. It had only been 6 or 7 years, but he had already reached the early stage of core formation. How was this possible? But the truth was right in front of him. Without this cultivation, it was impossible to release one's vitality and form 3 vivid twin lotuses. Yang Qian's throat trembled. He himself had spent more than 50 years to reach the early stage of core formation, which was not bad. After a long time he said, "Core formation disciples can go to Penglai Pavilion's utility hall to register for the competition." Suddenly he remembered something and changed the topic, "Wait for me here, don't leave yet." With that he ran away. Yu Qianqiu was startled and didn't know what he was going to do. After waiting for a while he saw Yang Qian and Guan Weiwu rushing over. He groaned in his heart. "Damn it. Looks like I have to bleed a little this time. Otherwise I won't be able to fool them." Guan Weiwu walked up to him and asked with a serious expression, "Are you really at the early stage of core formation? What is going on? You should know that this is not a small matter." Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. I have something to say to you in private. I also want to go to your pill room to show you something." "You want to go to my pill room?" Guan Weiwu's eyes flashed as he looked at his favorite disciple and said, "Follow me." Yu Qianqiu obediently followed his master to the elder's pill room under the alchemy pavilion. Yang Qian knew that the master and disciple had something private to talk about, so he didn't follow. Guan Weiwu turned around and said, "There's only the two of us here. If you have something to say, say it." Yu Qianzhou embarrassedly said, "I deserve to die. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. In fact, I have long since developed a better method to make the vitality pill. However, I was blinded by greed and secretly made a lot of it for myself. That's why I was able to forcefully raise my cultivation to the core formation stage in a few years." His voice became softer and softer as if he had made a huge mistake. "What?" Guan Weiwu cried out in surprise. "Is what you said true?" Then his face was full of surprise. He eagerly rubbed his palms and regretfully said, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Why didn't you say so earlier? Damn it. If it wasn't for this competition and the fact that the 10,000 fragrance garden has a limited supply of spirit herbs, I wouldn't have said it even if I was beaten to death." Yu Qianzhou muttered in his heart and explained, "Actually, I wanted to tell Master long ago, but I made a mistake first, so I didn't dare to say it. This time, I heard that there is a competition at the cultivation pavilion, but no one from my alchemy pavilion is participating. This disciple can't take this lying down and wants to compete with the disciples of the cultivation pavilion. That's why I said this. I hope Master can see this disciple's sincerity and help this disciple out of this predicament. This disciple promises not to do this again. Let's not talk about this for now. There are spirit herbs for refining the vitality pill. First, refine a furnace for me to see." Guan Weiwu pointed to a pile of spirit herbs to the side with an anxious expression. Yu Qianzhou shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "The Pavilion of Cultivation's competition requires those who are at least core formation to participate. Because of this, I revealed my cultivation level. I thought about how I would refine pills for myself. I don't know what the consequences would be if word got out. Right now, my heart is in a mess. How could I still have the mood to refine pills?" Guan Weiwu was surprised and immediately shouted, "Who dares to say that you did it for yourself? If anyone dares to say that, tell them to come find me. Everything was clearly arranged by me, so what are you worried about?" He then laughed mischievously and said, "Good disciple, come refine a furnace for Master to see. Master will take care of everything else for you, so you don't need to worry." Chapter 149. This kind of thing he could only fool him. In fact, he didn't know how many origin chi pills he would need to take to break through from foundation establishment to core formation. To be able to be so fast was all because of the top-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianzhou bowed to the ground again. "Thank you, Master, for your help. No need to be so polite. Quickly let Master see how you refine the origin chi pills." Guan Weiwu couldn't wait any longer. Yu Qianzhou immediately picked up a few spiritual herbs, threw them into the furnace and concentrated on refining. Guan Weiwu's divine sense followed and once again witnessed his disciple's miraculous refining technique. He shook his head and sighed. He couldn't figure out what was going on. With his own alchemy attainments, he couldn't learn such a technique. Yu Qianzhou also couldn't figure out why his master was so stupid. Even that brat Chen Feng had learned his refining technique quite well, but he still couldn't get the hang of it. Perhaps it was because he didn't teach him diligently. But he was his master, and the disciple teaching his master was too embarrassing for anyone to ask. Yu Qianzhou actually didn't know that his refining technique was actually faster for newcomers who had never come into contact with alchemy. The more experienced they were, the more they would have their own deep-rooted beliefs. It wasn't something that could be changed easily. 20 origin chi pills were fresh out of the furnace. Guan Weiwu looked at the hazy pill halo in his hand and sighed again and again. "So it's like this, disciple. You're really a genius." Master pondered for a lifetime and couldn't figure it out, but, AI. Master will help you ask the sect for credit. "Don't, Master, please don't do this again. Actually, without Master's strong support, I wouldn't have been able to comprehend the refining method with peace of mind. This credit should be Master's." Yu Qianzhou said sincerely. In his heart he thought, "I'll only be at ease if you accept the benefits." Unexpectedly, Guan Weiwu shook his head and smiled bitterly. "What kind of person do you think Master is?" In the end, Yu Qianzhou rejected it a few times, but it still didn't work. When it came to respecting intellectual property rights, the old man was fair and just leaving people speechless. It was easy to imagine what happened next. Sect Master Feng Xiangtian arrived with a group of elders. After confirming the truth, Yu Qianzhou almost couldn't raise his head due to the praise. Feng Xiangtian was so happy that he immediately ordered people to give Yu Qianzhou 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones. This really shocked the surrounding people. All the elders looked at this millionaire with a strange expression. This was not a small amount of money, but it was indeed worth it compared to his contribution. The sect leader happily led the group of people away. Guan Weiwu pulled Yu Qianqiu to the side and quietly explained some things to him. The latter was pleasantly surprised and nodded repeatedly to thank his master, while the former began to arrange the refining plan of the essence chi pill in the alchemy pavilion. Yu Qianqiu never got involved in this kind of thing. He left the alchemy pavilion and went directly to Penglai pavilion. When he arrived at the miscellaneous hall's chore office and asked to participate in the pavilion of cultivation's competition, the disciples in the chore office looked at each other in dismay. They didn't expect a disciple of the alchemy pavilion to participate in this competition. According to the rules, they had to accept it, but when they checked Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, they found that it was still early-stage foundation establishment. Thus, they told him that he had to go to the pavilion of cultivation to prove his cultivation as early-stage core formation before he was qualified to participate in this competition. Yu Qianqiu immediately went to the pavilion of cultivation and found that he couldn't prove his cultivation beyond his cultivation level. As a result, he went from mid-stage foundation establishment to late-stage foundation establishment to early-stage core formation in one go, causing the elders who helped him to be a bit confused. He didn't care about this and went to the Penglai Pavilion's chore office again. He finally successfully signed up to participate in the Pavilion of Cultivation's competition. Just as he was about to leave the chore office, he ran into someone he really didn't want to see. Someone who looked at him with hostility every time they met. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "Elder Yan." With that, he was about to leave. "Yu Qianqiu, take care," the chore office's head Elder Yan Ta said coldly. Yu Qianqiu stopped, turned around and said respectfully, "Elder Yan, what's the matter?" Yan Ta said in a deep voice, "Why do you hide when you see me? Did you do something shameful?" Elder Yan must be joking. Disciple wouldn't dare. "I have something to ask you. Do you dare to answer me honestly?" Disciple will definitely tell you everything I know. Actually, Yu Qianqiu wasn't afraid of him, but he really didn't want to provoke him. After staying on supporting Immortal Island for so many years, Yu Qianqiu more or less knew some things. Although supporting Immortal Island was known as the #1 sect in the cultivation world, it wasn't a monolithic entity. It was actually controlled by a few internal forces. These forces had always been competing in the dark, and they all wanted to take control of supporting Immortal Island. Starting from Ma Jiugu's generation, the Guan family produced many talented people, and that generation started to take control of supporting Immortal Island. When it came to Guan Dinghai's generation, because of his daughter's matter, Guan Dinghai was pushed down from the position of sect master by the opposition. However, the Guan family didn't want to hand over the power to the opposition. Normally, the position would be passed to the next generation, Guan Weiwu. However, Guan Weiwu was too disappointing and couldn't take up such a big responsibility. In the end, the Guan family pushed Guan Dinghai's eldest personal disciple, Feng Xiangtian, to the position of sect master. It should be said that the power of supporting Immortal Island still belonged to the Guan family. As for Yu Qianqiu, as Guan Weiwu's personal disciple, he was also a member of the Guan family. In the past, Yu Qianqiu didn't know about it, so he always went against Yan Shu. Now that he knew and understood that Yan Shu happened to be a member of the opposition, he couldn't help but feel that it was a close call. If he wasn't careful, he would be involved in the competition between the major forces. That wasn't a joke. Any one of them could be stronger than a sect like An Kuangtsung. He really couldn't afford to offend them. Yan Tua stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, "I heard something recently. I heard that during the Demon Ghost Regent's trial, when the Ghost General killed the disciples of various sects in a big tent, you were also in that big tent. Is that true?" "Yes. I also heard that you have a good relationship with the Ghost General and saved many people. Why didn't you save the people in the big tent as well?" When Yan Tua said this, his tone revealed a bit of fierceness. Obviously, he was still brooding over his son's death. "Damn it. Your son wanted to kill me that time, but he was already killed by me in advance. You still want me to save him? Old bastard, is there something wrong with your head?" Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "Elder Yan, you may not know this, but at that time the Ghost General ordered us to meet him within an hour. A group of disciples with weaker cultivation really had nowhere to hide, so we could only do as he said. As a result, some disciples disobeyed the Ghost General's order, which made the Ghost General furious. At that time I begged him bitterly, but the Ghost General never showed mercy to those who dared to disobey him, so, sigh." Yan Tuo's face twitched for a while before he asked again, With the ghost general's strength, killing them is naturally a piece of cake. Why did he have to capture them in the tent before killing them? Old bastard, I asked the ghost general to do this in order to kill your son. How dare you be so fierce to me? You see how I'll deal with you. Xianxia paused and said, Elder Yin, I won't hide it from you. Actually, I've been suspecting something. Don't talk in riddles with me. Yin Tua snorted coldly. Xianxia nodded and said with a troubled expression, I accidentally heard something at that time, and I don't know if I heard it wrong. I didn't dare to say it because it's not a small matter after all. Actually, I suspect that those people are not dead. Yin Tuo's body trembled and he grabbed Xianxia's shoulder and said while gasping for breath, What did you say? What did you hear at that time? Why do you suspect that those people are not dead? Chapter 150. Sigh. Old fart, it's easy if you're anxious, but I'm afraid you're not. Xianxia looked at the hand on his shoulder and told him seriously, Elder Yin, you're hurting me. Yin Tuo reacted and immediately let go of his hand. He squeezed out an ugly smile and said, Tell me your suspicions. Yes. Since Elder Yin has asked, I will naturally tell you the truth. Xianxia lowered his head and pondered for a while. He then raised his head and said, Elder Yin, you might not know, but Ghost General has a concubine named Yuji. My suspicions are related to her. At that time, when I begged the Ghost General to let those disciples go, I ended up angering the Ghost General and he chased me out. Before I came out, I seem to have heard that Yuji begging the Ghost General not to kill those people. Yin Tuo's eyes widened. Didn't you say that you saw Ghost General kill those disciples with your own eyes? Who said that? I've never said that I saw the Ghost General kill them with my own eyes. I don't dare to say things that I don't have proof. You must know that when Ghost General broke camp, I didn't even see the bodies of those disciples. All the disciples who were there saw it. Xianxia looked very innocent. Yin Tua swallowed hard and said with an agitated expression, Then do you remember what Yuji said at that time? Elder Yin, don't rush me. It's been so long. Let me think about it. Xianxia frowned. Yin Tua quickly nodded and said, Think about it. Think about it slowly. I won't rush you once you've thought it through. Xianxia made a few gestures as if he was thinking about it carefully. Yin Tua waited at the side with a bitter smile, which almost made the former want to laugh. After a long time he slowly nodded and said, General, I think Yuji's original words were like this. General, I've seen those servants who served me in Chili Wind Valley for thousands of years and I'm really tired of them. Why don't you let them go and send them to Chili Wind Valley to be servants? What do you think? Xianxia imitated Yuji's speech vividly and came back to his senses. He said seriously, If I remember correctly, that should be what she said. Then do you remember if Ghost General promised her or not? Yin Tua asked excitedly. Xianxia frowned and said thoughtfully, Because I had already walked out of the tent at that time, I seemed to vaguely hear Ghost General say very good, or something. But after thinking about it I think I must have heard it wrong. Otherwise, after Ghost General let them go, how could we not even see their shadows? Alas. Elder Yin, just pretend that I didn't say what I said today. I'm just guessing about what happened that day. Let's take everyone's conclusion as the truth. I still have something to do and will leave first. Yin Tua stood there in a daze. After a long time he came back to his senses and found that Xianxia had already disappeared. He opened his mouth and froze in place. 2 days later, on the square in front of the main hall of Penglai Pavilion, a big wooden sign announced the list of the competition, which attracted many people to watch. There were nearly 300 disciples participating in the nascent soul stage competition and nearly 1,000 disciples participating in the core formation stage competition. Almost all of them were disciples of the cultivation pavilion. However, there was one exception. At the bottom was written, Alchemy Pavilion, Early Stage Core Formation, Xianxia. Set off by the more than 1,000 pavilion of cultivation disciples, it was exceptionally prominent. Perhaps someone was deliberately making fun of it, but the words at the very bottom were twice as large as the ones at the top. It was impossible for it not to stand out. This news immediately caused an uproar on Fuxin Island. First, no one expected the famous Xianxia to reach the core formation stage so quickly. Second, no one expected something that had not been seen for thousands of years to happen. There were actually disciples from other sects who wanted to compete with the cultivation pavilion. It was really exciting. In comparison, no one paid attention to how his cultivation level increased so quickly. Everyone was guessing how many rounds Xianxia could last. Due to the celebrity effect, the alchemy pavilion suddenly became the focal point of Fuxian Island. As long as someone met a disciple of the alchemy pavilion, they would stop them and ask them about Yu Qianqiu. The questions they asked were very strange. In short, most people felt that Yu Qianqiu was looking for a thrill. Yu Qianqiu's courtyard was also constantly visited by guests. The first to visit was Furong. After the two of them parted ways, Gu Qingyun came again. The moment he saw Yu Qianqiu, he asked in amazement, "Tisk Tiske? Your actions are no different from challenging the cultivation pavilion. There are many core formation disciples in our cultivation pavilion who want to meet you in the first battle. They want to defeat you and make a name for themselves. By the way, when did you reach the core formation stage? How come I didn't know? It seems it is good to have a principal elder of the alchemy pavilion as a master. Elder Guan must have given you a lot of elixirs, right? Otherwise, how could your cultivation level increase so quickly? Do you have anything good for me?" Yu Qianqiu directly coaxed this meddlesome woman who asked a lot of questions to leave. Not long after, Qing Gingxing heard the news and came again. After praising his courage, he shook his head and left with a sigh. Following that, Yang Qian also came. He said helplessly, "You really dared to do it." He walked around him a few times and also left. Soon after, Ko Xuanhuan and the other two women, as well as Xiao Wanqing from the safe pavilion, also came together. The four women were very confident in him. Xiao Wanqing even encouraged him and declared, "Tomorrow the four of us will watch your battle together." Yu Qianqiu thanked the four women and saw them off. Just as he was about to take a breath, his master came again. Guan Weiwu stared at him from head to toe countless times and finally sighed, "Disciple, if possible, try to hold on for a few more matches. You have to know that if you lose the first match, it will not look good for our alchemy pavilion." I didn't think you would really be so impulsive." After he finished speaking, he scratched his dirty hair and left in confusion. He originally thought that those who should come were all here and that it should be about time. Who knew that there would be more people coming and each of them was higher than the last? First, there was a person who surprised him. Yan Tua actually came personally and encouraged him before leaving. Then the head elder of Wanfeng Garden, Fernan, also came. Elder Fernan was like a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law. He nodded with gratification and said, "Since you have signed up, don't think too much. When the time comes, go all out. So what if it is the cultivation pavilion? We are all at core formation stage. Why should we be afraid of them?" Yu Qianqiu repeatedly said yes and sent him out. The person who came next shocked Yu Qianqiu. It was actually his master's father, the current Guan Dinghai, the previous head of Fuxian Island. Guan Dinghai stared at him deeply and asked, "Did you decide this yourself or your master? Or did someone else make you do this?" After Yu Qianqiu repeatedly stressed that it was his decision, Guan Dinghai nodded non-committally and left. It was hard to tell if he was happy or unhappy. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. He thought about everyone and thought, Ma Jugu will be next. Unfortunately, he guessed correctly. Ma Jugu really came with Lan Bingxue. Ma Jugu revealed a rare smile and said, "I was right about you. A man shouldn't be so timid. Sigh. It's so good to be young." Before leaving, she added, "There is something you don't know. Not long after you left the mulberry garden, that girl Yan Zixia went back. As for where she went, I think you should know, right?" With that said, she trembled and walked away. Lan Bingxue looked at him with a complicated gaze. Not far from the courtyard, there were two nascent soul disciples chatting. When they saw the people coming and going, they couldn't help but notice them. When they saw that the people coming were all of higher ranks than the other, they were speechless. They looked at each other and quickly left. They were afraid that they would see something the higher-ups didn't want them to see. Yu Qianqiu stood at the entrance of the courtyard and took a deep breath. He really didn't think that participating in a competition would cause such a big commotion. After confirming that no one else would come, he decided to take a good rest. No matter what, he had to rest for tomorrow's competition. In fact, he was worried that the sect head would also come. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.